What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto loses his humanity towards his family? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Finally, after 6 years of travel, Jiraiya had decided it was time for both him and Naruto to return to Konoha. Both of them had their own reasons to choose such a time to return to Konoha. 1. Naruto would make it back just in time to participate in the Konoha Academy graduation. Not that Naruto could possibly fail now, knowing what he knows about ninja techniques and such. The good thing about having the pervert Sennin as your guardian and sensei was that whenever he wishes to scout around for new inspiration for his books, that basically meant he'll just teach you a new technique and leave you to your own demise, sometimes for days on end. Naruto got used to his behaviors very soon though, and they shared something like a love-hate relationship. For the past 6 years, Jiraiya and Naruto had literally traveled around the world twice over. The rain country, stone, sand, wave, grass, lightning, mist, you name it, they've been there. During their travels, Naruto had also matured a lot for his age, though for good or bad, it's still debatable. Emotionally, he doesn't trust people very often. He understood that for most people, if they knew what resided in him, would hate him immediately, so he doesn't readily trust easily. He had also become very cautious in his actions and not very talkative. Since there were usually only 2 people traveling together, him and Jiraiya, pranks and other jokes were not that appreciated. Naruto had also become rather antisocial, and very reserved with his thoughts. Physically, he was still considered short for his age, but had developed firm, lean muscles on every inch of his body. His taijutsu was excellent. He excels in speed, power, stealth, agility and even sensory detection, using his 9-tailed senses. As for his knowledge in ninjutsu and genjutsu, he had vast amounts of ninjutsu techniques at his disposal, and he can manipulate his chakra to render any genjutsu useless. His only weakness is that he still does not have full control over his chakra manipulation and control. So the 2 of them set off to return to Konoha. Naruto and Jiraiya arrived back in Konoha on the very day of the Konoha Academy Genin selection exam, and Naruto made it just in time to participate in said exam. Everyone was very surprised by his reappearance. Those that remembered him anyway. But only Iruka showed any true delight in seeing him again. In the village, all the parents whom had recognized his whiskers-like scars on his face felt a little apprehension for his return, but the 3rd Hokage had already announced that if anyone dares to make a move on the boy, they would be executed immediately. The children, those who remembered him at all remembered him to be the outcast he always were in the past and generally stayed out of his way, which he was fine with anyway. Due to Naruto's sudden reappearance and registration to undertake the Academy Genin selection exam, he was put as the last to perform the test. And so, he spent most of his time sleeping, not caring of how the other children performed, nor was he interested in what the exam procedures were until his turn. Finally, it was Naruto's turn to take the test and be judged. The other children in the class were all curious as to his strengths, but they held not much hope for his scores. The first test was to test his kunai throwing skills, which he completed onto the bull's eye of a board even before Iruka finished speaking. The second test was to test his knowledge of the ninja rules, in which he simply replied he didn't remember any of them. This infuriated Mizuki, but Iruka gave Naruto the go-ahead. This was because Naruto did have an excuse, considering he had only gone to the academy school for less than 1 year, when he was 5, and couldn't possibly be expected to remember all the rules back then. But to finish the 3rd and final test, Naruto had to complete a fully functional Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto made no visible hand seals, but his Bunshin suddenly appeared next to the target and retrieved his kunai. Later, Naruto was announced to pass the Genin selection exam. Due to the unexpected addition to the student number, Iruka did not have any extra shinobi head protector to give to Naruto, and so, he asked him out for ramen instead. Naruto still loved ramen. After eating at least 15 bowls of ramen at Ichiraku, Naruto and Iruka visited the Heroes Memorial in Konoha. Iruka then reminded Naruto of his own life story and explained that at first, he too had hated Naruto because it was the 9 tails that had killed his parents. But after watching Naruto grow up, he realized that Naruto and him were very much alike and that Naruto wasn't the 9 tails. Iruka apologized for not being there to help Naruto before and gave Naruto his own head protector, stating that as long as Naruto wore his head protector, it would be as if Iruka himself was right next to him. Naruto smiled for the first time in 3 whole years and hugged Iruka tightly in appreciation. Naruto then went to meet the 3rd Hokage to get his ninja registration done and also asked the 3rd Hokage if he could look at the image of his father, the 4th Hokage. It was there, in front of his father's portrait, that Naruto made his promise. He didn't really call Konoha home anymore and he didn't very much like the people here, but since his father was willing to sacrifice himself and the future of his son for this village, Naruto would honor his father's legacy and continue to protect Konoha for him, until the day he himself realized what was so important about Konoha. The 3rd had overheard all of this and was about to explain to Naruto, but decided against it. It would be better for Naruto to learn for himself and create a home here for himself. The next day, Naruto waited patiently on his seat while all the other children clown around. A few of the bullies tried to intimidate him like they did before he left, but they didn't even get a raised eyebrow for their efforts. A girl named Sakura Haruno sat herself next to him and ogled the infamous Uchiha Sasuke. When the names of the members of Team 7 were read out, only Sakura had any expression, happiness to be paired with Sasuke. Naruto didn't even flinch, but all the other students were still wondering why he was paired with Uchiha Sasuke unless he was really weak. The truth of the matter was that Naruto had told Iruka to let him pass but still retain the same status as he had been before he left the academy 6 years ago, as the lowest ranked member of the class. Iruka didn't know why he requested this but followed his wish anyway since the 3rd Hokage also made such a request. They waited for 3 hours in class for their late sensei. When Naruto finally felt the man's chakra, in a fit of rage, he threw a kunai at Kakashi, which was caught by the Junin ninja of course. Kakashi smiled and laughed nervously at the children and apologized for his lateness. The introductions were made with the only interesting part coming from Naruto. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen. I dislike many things. I have no ambition and no dream, but my only wish is to understand why my father was willing to die to protect this village. Kakashi was shocked by this response, and he concluded that Naruto knows about his father. After that, Kakashi gave his normal speech about survival training the next day. Naruto ignored the no breakfast rule and ate some that morning before going to the training grounds. After another 3 hours of waiting, Kakashi finally arrived and told them the new rules to the real Genin selection exam. While Sakura and Sasuke immediately hid in the surrounding areas, Naruto just stood where he was and stared. Kakashi asked him if he was going to attack anytime soon or did he have a strategy. Naruto simply answered, "I have no wish to become a genin or anything in life. I have no reason to fight against you for those stupid bells. If the other two wanted it so much to become shinobis, let them. I'll just wait for the next time." Kakashi was silently seething at Naruto's nonchalant attitude. In a way, Naruto was kind enough to volunteer being the one that fails so that Sasuke and Sakura could become genins. But him simply giving up without even trying infuriated Kakashi and he snapped back, expecting a result without even trying, willing to wait for an uncertain future. If you continue having these kinds of attitude, you will never understand why your father did what he did. You wouldn't even be able to go through half the things your father went through for Konoha. You are nothing but a coward that runs away from facing the past deeds of your father if you continue to turn your back from this absolute truth. The truth in which you yourself must undergo hardship to find answers for. Naruto grew angry at Kakashi's outburst and charged him, which was exactly what Kakashi had wanted him to do in the first place. Firstly, Naruto attacked Kakashi using taijutsu to test out his reflexes and reaction rate. Since Naruto was already very good with taijutsu, both Kakashi and Naruto had to parry each other for some time. After dodging Naruto's fist, Kakashi grabbed one of Naruto's arm, slammed him onto the ground, twisted said arm at the wrist and elbow until Naruto was rendered immovable with Kakashi sitting on his back. Kakashi was about to speak when the Naruto in his hand suddenly disappeared. Realizing it was a Kage Bunshin, shadow replication, he was fighting, Kakashi saw in the corner of his eye another Naruto rushing at him at top speed. He couldn't dodge in time so Kakashi blocked the kick with his arms. The block had enough force to almost crack Kakashi's bones as he was dragged along the sand due to the momentum and impact. Naruto didn't stop though, as he ran after Kakashi again and he threw several kunais in his direction. Kakashi jumped up to avoid the kunais but widened his eyes as Naruto performed his first seal, the Gokakyu no Jutsu, powerful fireball, 1. After the giant flame blast, all that was left was a burning log. Kakashi had used Kawarimi no Jutsu to replace himself with an inanimate object. However, Naruto did not lose focus as he immediately threw several shurikens towards a certain tree near the edge of their battle. Kakashi jumped away from the tree only milliseconds before those shurikens reached it and blasted half the tree into small bits of burning wood chips. Chakra-reinforced shurikens, thought Kakashi as several Naruto's Kage Bunshins started attacking at the same time. Surrounding him first, then striking forward one at a time in a motion of in-out of Kakashi's danger zone. Even though Kakashi was keeping up with their movements but he was also feeling slightly pressured. He then realized he doesn't have enough time to strike down any of the Naruto Bunshins before another takes its place, and it also gave him no time to perform any seals either. After quickly blocking one of the clone's attacks, Kakashi jumped up into the air and performed another type of fire blast seal. Kaden Karyu Enden, Fire type, Fire Dragon Blast, 2. The massive flame blast burned up all the remaining clones but the real Naruto was nowhere to be found. Kakashi landed silently, finding himself enjoying the challenges that Naruto had given him, though a little bit out of breath than usual. Since he was already on his guard, suspicious of Naruto's attacks, Kakashi immediately noticed the many kunais and shurikens flying his way. Wondering why Naruto wouldn't do the same thing twice, he was slightly taken back when one of the kunais set off a trap directly behind him. He dodged the rest of oncoming weapons that the trap had flung at him, wondering when did Naruto had the time to set up such an elaborate trap. That was the moment he was attacked by a hidden Sasuke from his side. Kakashi mentally sighed. He had completely forgotten that he still had 2 other students to contend with, not just Naruto. And Sasuke seems to be just as good, if a little bit less cautious than Naruto had been. Defending against all of Sasuke's punches and kicks, he was surprised that Sasuke actually touched the bells at all, and immediately kicked away himself. Naruto had not been interested in the bells. If he had been, then maybe the bells would have been long gone by now. During the previous fights, Naruto had only been angry at Kakashi directly and fought him over said statements, not for the purpose of getting the bells. Turning his attention back to the situation at hand, Kakashi realized that Sasuke had repeated the same seals as Naruto, the Gokakyu no Jutsu, powerful fireball technique. But this time, Kakashi did not use Kawarimi no Jutsu to escape the flames. Instead, he went underground and used Doden, Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, Earth type, inner decapitation technique, 3, against Sasuke, grabbing him by his feet and pulling him down until only his head is above the ground. It was just at that moment that Sakura came through the bushes and saw this scene. She had been trying to find Sasuke for a while now, since Naruto's fight against Kakashi. After hearing Sasuke's grunt of pain, she immediately ran after the sound, only to come out of the clearing and seeing Sasuke's supposedly decapitated head on the ground. Naturally, she screamed then fainted, even though Kakashi was still there crouching and looking at her curiously. Damn, I didn't even get to use any genjutsu on her and she still fainted. Oh well. Slightly disappointed at Sakura's bad performance, Kakashi was completely caught off guard when Naruto materialized behind him and tried to stab him with a kunai. Kakashi barely missed the attack though his shoulder did get scratched. Naruto then threw said kunai in Kakashi's direction. While Kakashi was busy avoiding the kunai, Naruto slammed his left hand into the ground, grabbed onto Sasuke's shoulder and pulled him out of the ground. With his free right hand, Naruto then threw a smoke bomb on the ground, creating a smokescreen and escaped with Sasuke. Kakashi was starting to get nervous as to what ideas Naruto has when he freed Sasuke. On the other side of the clearing, hidden behind leaves, Sasuke wrenched his shoulder out of Naruto's hold and glared at him. Naruto glared right back at Sasuke, then moved his mouth slowly, mentally wondering if Sasuke could lip read. Turns out he was lucky. Sasuke could lip read, though not much, and you had to go slow for him to contemplate the sentence completely. Look, moron. I don't like this either, but if you want those bells, you're gonna have to work with me here. Sasuke glared at Naruto for a while later, then finally sighed silently. Fine. What's the plan? Naruto nodded back to him, indicating he too accepts this short truce between them, and laid out his plan of attack. Within the visible clearing, Kakashi had gone into high alert. With both Naruto and Sasuke working together, it would be a lot tougher to beat them both at the same time. He was wondering whether he should use his Sharingan when Sakura finally woke up. Huh? Where am I? Remembering, Sakura immediately sat up. Where's Sasuke? She yelled. That was the exact moment that Naruto and Sasuke rushed out of their hiding places and attacked Kakashi. Several Naruto's Kage Bunshins, shadow replications, rushed towards Kakashi from the front. After a few blocks and blows, only one Naruto remained, the real Naruto. While Kakashi was concentrating hard against Naruto, he reacted too slowly when Sasuke appeared by his side, swiping Kakashi off his feet when he swung his legs in a half circle while crouching and stretched his hand out to grab the bells. Kakashi saw this last move, jumped up and hit both Naruto and Sasuke in the face with both his legs. Both Naruto and Sasuke flew backwards due to the impact. When Kakashi finally landed from his jump, Sasuke was holding both bells triumphantly in his hand. After several seconds of stunted silence, Sakura screamed out her joy, running towards the slightly injured Sasuke, and hugged him so tightly that he couldn't breathe. She kept on reiterating the same sentence. Sasuke is SOOO cool. Sasuke is SOOO great. Sasuke is the greatest. Kakashi recovered from his shock, lifting one hand behind his head and scratched it sheepishly. Well, I guess both Sasuke and Naruto have passed this test then. Sakura froze on those words, immediately letting go of an almost unconscious Sasuke, rushed at Kakashi and screamed out to him in protest. Does that mean I failed? No, I can't fail. Please give me another chance. Kakashi-sensei, pleasey. Both Kakashi and Naruto winced at her high-pitched voice. No, came Sasuke's soft but determined answer. You are too weak to become a useful shinobi. You should quit while you're ahead, Sakura. Sakura almost started crying as she imagined her days without Sasuke's constant companion. That is, until Kakashi interrupted. You're wrong, Sasuke. Do you know why I said both you and Naruto passed? Because we were the ones who got the bell. Answered Sasuke simply. Kakashi shook his head and was about to answer, but Naruto interrupted him. Sakura can have the second bell if she wants. While the other three looked back at him in question, Naruto answered. I'm not interested in the bells. Smirking at Kakashi, he continued. I just wanted to piss Kakashi off, that's all. Kakashi sighed and shook his head in resignation as Sakura jumped up with joy. Loosing his patient, he shouted, Shut up. All of you. Silence ensured. Kakashi then explained that the whole purpose of this exercise wasn't set up to test their individual strengths and weaknesses, it was to test their teamwork. With a team of 3 genins, they should be able to help each other gather the bells from a junin. The test was set up this way to see who would be willing to work with their partners to accomplish a difficult task. He referred to what he said before, stating that why both Naruto and Sasuke had passed was because they worked together as a team. After that speech, Kakashi then told them their individual weaknesses. Sasuke was overconfident of his abilities, too arrogant to analyze the situation properly, and too self-righteous to work with another. Sakura was too obsessed with just following Sasuke and ignoring her other teammate to the point that she was completely useless during a mission. Naruto's weakness was being difficult to motivate at all in completing even a simple task and reacts too emotionally when push comes to shove. Overall, they had plenty of weaknesses to overcome within their genin days. After a long pause, Kakashi smiled and confirmed that even though they need to work on their teamwork, this Team 7, he passed them. Sakura was jumping for joy again. Sasuke was smirking while Naruto was silently contemplating Kakashi's words. After that, Naruto walked silently back towards the hero's memorial. After a long while, his official guardian and sensei, Jiraiya, suddenly visited him. So, how was it? Your team, that is. I'm paired with Uchiha Sasuke and Haruno Sakura. Hey, Uchiha, huh? Damn, must be a spoiled genius brat then, right? Naruto lowered his head. I guess. The silence stretched for a while longer until Naruto asked his guardian a question. Naruto. Why did you bring me back now? Because I thought it was high time for you to come back. Why? Naruto insisted. Jiraiya signed. This is the place where you were born. The place where your father and mother called home, and as such, it should be your home too. I know you don't really have much good memory about this place. But it's really a wonderful place to call home, you know. Naruto turned around and looked at Jiraiya with sad eyes. How can I call it home if I don't feel welcomed here? Jiraiya looked straight back at him without batting an eye. Because soon enough, you will learn what is precious in the Konoha that you won't find anywhere else. Smiling at Naruto's confused expression, Jiraiya answered again. Haven't you already found someone important here? After a few minutes of thought, Naruto nodded as he remembered Iruka. Jiraiya asked again. Would you fight to protect this important person? Naruto nodded again without resistance. Then you would become even stronger. Naruto looked confused again. Jiraiya raised his eyes to the names on the memorial. Remember Naruto, true strength comes only to those whom are trying to protect their loved ones. When you have someone to protect, you will understand what I mean. Naruto nodded, though uneasily, turned to look at the memorial. Just like father did, Jiraiya nodded in silence. He protected all his loved ones in Konoha. The Yondaime was a truly strong person. After several weeks of these tedious missions, all three of the genins in Team 7 have become pretty restless. Soon, Naruto had finally had enough and his anger and frustration burst. When I signed up to become a ninja, I did not think I would spend my time babysitting, doing gardening, painting walls, taking dogs out for walks or finding missing animals. Though said coldly, his voice hid the undertone of rage. Hokage sighed and was about to tell him it couldn't be helped, but he was interrupted by Naruto again. Why can't we have at least one C-rank mission? It's a lot more entertaining than all these D ranks. Sighing again, Hokage asked the other two team members if they agreed with Naruto. Sasuke raised his hand in agreement almost immediately, and Sakura also raised her hand once she saw Sasuke doing the same. Why don't you just give them a C-rank mission if it'll shut them up for a bit? A nasal voice called out from the doorway. Naruto's eyebrow twitched, he quickly turned around, raising a finger and directed it straight at his guardian, shouting in anger. And where have you been these 3 weeks? I was busy. Jiraiya replied with a shrug. Yeah right, probably peeking into the female public baths again. Naruto retorted hotly, folding his arms together and glaring at his guardian. If you must know, I was gathering information for my next book. Jiraiya tried to explain, meaning you were peeking into the female public baths. Geez, don't you ever grow up, pervert senin. Naruto's eyes continued to twitch in irritation as he snorted in disgust. Stop calling me a pervert, you shrimp. Jiraiya scolded, starting to get really annoyed at the blonde boy. Pervert, 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 open pervert. With both hands in front of his mouth, Naruto yelled at the top of his lungs. Why you ungrateful little? Jiraiya threatened with narrowed eyes as he lunged towards the blonde boy. Before Jiraiya could reach him, Naruto had performed a seal, the Oroik no Jutsu seal, Why no Jutsu. Immediately, Jiraiya forgot about his previous arguments as he started drooling over the Why naked Naruto. Also at this time, several people in the same room spurted a large amount of blood flowing from their noses, some even rendered unconscious. These people included Kakashi, who was on the ground hyperventilating, the third Hokage, who had fallen over his chair and continued to twitch while lying on the floor, Iruka, who was currently sticking a lot of tissues up his nose to stop the blood flow, and even Sasuke, who had a hand covering his nose and mouth though a little trickle of blood can be seen, and he was currently standing with his back to Naruto. Seeing that, Sakura immediately launched herself at Naruto and screamed at him until he returned to his normal form. Geez, I didn't think Konoha had so many perverts. Naruto added while smirking. Cough, cough, Finet, I'll give you'd AC Rand Mizian, replied the Hokage, still reeling from blood loss. After detailing the protection mission, he introduced their client, a Mr. Tazuna. Afterwards, they set off on their first C-rank mission. The group set out, traveling on the way with few complaints. Sakura became curious and asked if the Wave Country had a ninja academy of their own. Kakashi was just about to answer when Naruto interrupted them and started explaining the whole situation with the 5 cages and the 5 most powerful countries in the world currently. Sakura was surprised that Naruto knew something in which she did not, and so she asked him, "How did you know all that?" Naruto simply replied that he has been there before. While Naruto was explaining about the 5 great shinobi countries, Kakashi noticed a suspicious puddle of water on the ground. Once they walked past it, 2 people emerged from the puddle and started attacking the group. Kakashi was visually seen being caught in their deadly chain and then ripped apart by it. The 3 genins and Tazuna-san all fell into shock. Sakura screamed in fear as the 2 enemies raced towards Naruto to kill him. They've just surrounded Naruto when Sasuke came to the rescue. He struck their combined chain onto a nearby tree with a shuriken and kunai, and then managed to hit them both in the face using his feet. The 2 opponents released the chain from their holder and started running away towards different targets. One aimed at the paralyzed Naruto and the other ran towards Tazuna. Sasuke made a split-second decision, choosing to keep Sakura and their client safe and leaving Naruto on his own. However, just when the enemy reached Naruto, that Naruto disappeared into a cloud of smoke. He was a Bunshin. Immediately after the Bunshin disappeared, the real Naruto reappeared behind the opponent that went to attack him. Naruto grabbed onto his opponent's hand, slamming him down onto the ground and twisted said arm painfully until it almost broke at the elbow, rendering the man immobile. Kakashi had also reappeared, unharmed to take out the other opponent. Even though Kakashi had planned on tying the 2 of them up and then asking Tazuna-san what was going on, Naruto did not have the patience to wait. He twisted the arm of his captive brutally, causing the man to scream in pain. "Who is your boss? What is your objective?" Naruto asked coldly, without mercy. Wanting to remain silent, the man screamed again as Naruto twisted his arm even more. "Talk, god damn it, or less you will know the meaning of pain." Naruto shouted his threats. "Stop it, you're gonna break his arm," yelled the other man, frantic at watching his brother in so much pain. "Naruto, stop, they have already been beaten, we don't need to torture them," ordered Kakashi in a calm but slightly tensed tone of voice. "Like hell I don't." Naruto yelled at Kakashi as his eyes started to gleam red while Kyuubi's chakra started leaking out. He then spoke to his captive with a softer but deadly serious tone of voice, reflecting his current cruel desires. "Talk or you will wish that I had killed you now rather than later. I am a master of pain and I know over 200 ways to make a man cry in agony." "Stop, stop, I'll talk. Please stop." The man yielded. Naruto loosens his grip on the arm he held slightly as well as the 3 painful pressure points in which his other hand had been pressing on the man's neck recently. Our boss is the devil of the mist. We were hired to take out that old man," indicating Tazuna. "That's all, we were only following orders. That's all there is, please let us go." The man pleaded rapidly. "Paid by who?" The icy voice of Naruto's sent shivers down the man's spine. "Naruto, stop it. If you continue, you're just as bad as the 2 of them," Kakashi commanded, seriously considering the option of physically stopping his student. Naruto glared right back at him with blood-red eyes and slitted pupils. The features of his eyes shocked all 4 of the group members, and Kakashi started to sweat a little. If the seal is broken now, then there is no way to stop thought. Naruto turned away, closing his eyes for a moment. He took a deep breath and released it. His eyes reopened again to reveal their normal sky blue shade. He released the arm of the opponent he was holding, but didn't release the hold he had on the man's neck. The free hand is raised slightly, forming a 2-finger pointing seal. "Hake Juni Tenketsu's Yanshu," yelled Naruto, and he quickly pushed 12 points on his opponent's back in seemingly random order. After that, he completely releases his captive, turned and started walking towards the other enemy, still held incarcerated by Kakashi. Naruto then did the same thing with the second enemy. Kakashi was confused over what Naruto did to the 2 of them. The previous man, having been just released, thought that he could take his chance at revenge. He launched himself at Naruto, aiming to strike his back. Both Sakura and Sasuke stood ready this time, awaiting the blow, but it never came. They were again shocked when the man tried to do certain seals, and suddenly ended up screaming on the floor halfway through making the seals. His body continued to shudder in pain, while the chakra he had summoned for the seals slowly dissipated, leaving a burning sensation throughout his body. "What did you do to him and me?" yelled the other man in fright, having watched his brother shake in agony. Naruto answered calmly, 12 of your most precious opening points on the chakra inner coil system have been rendered useless for life. If you try to use any chakra at all, it will burn your inner coils as well as your surrounding organs. I suggest you never try to use chakra again unless you wish to die." Shaking out of his reverie, Kakashi released his prisoner also, and the group slowly but surely left on their journey again. Not wanting to make Naruto even more angry, Kakashi decided not to press Naruto for the reasons why he acted the way he did against the two mist nens. After Tazuna-san had explained the real situation to Kakashi and the kids, they all decided to continue on with the mission, though Naruto had become even more quiet and sullen than usual. None of the others tried to talk to him, for they all knew that the only question to come out of their mouths would be to ask him about that new technique he had used against the demon brothers. This particular question, however, they were certain he wouldn't answer anyway. The group continued on their journey in silence, passing through the rivers and seas without incident, even admiring the new, yet unfinished bridge with awe and silence. Finally, they reached the shores of the wave country. The group walked for a while. Suddenly, Naruto stops in his tracks and threw a kunai into the surrounding bushes. Sakura and Tazuna gasped in fright, waiting for the next attack, but the rest of boys just stood still. For a while, nothing moved. Sakura breathed in a sigh of relief. "Naruto, could you stop acting cool for a second?" she yelled. "Stop trying to scare us to death." Tazuna agreed and glared at the non-moving boy. However, Naruto ignored them both. Naruto had narrowed his eyes while Kakashi went to investigate what he had hit. It was a snow rabbit. Sakura took one look at the freaked-out rabbit and felt sorry for it. She settled in to glare at Naruto. "Naruto, look what you did. You scared the life out of it. You moron." Naruto continued to ignore Sakura and shifted his gaze to a position inside a nearby tree. Suddenly, a shifting of wind was felt by Naruto instead of being heard. "Everyone, duck!" shouted Kakashi. Sasuke ducked instinctively to his instruction. Naruto had to push Sakura and Tazuna-san out of the way while he too ducked under the spinning weapon. Once the massive spinning sword flew by their heads, the group looked up in surprise. A man, whose face was wrapped up in bandages, stood on a massive sword-like object embedded in a tree a few meters up from the ground. Naruto silently analyzed the man's ability and ignored the conversation between Kakashi and Zabuza. He already knew that Kakashi was the renowned copycat Kakashi, so it was no surprise about the Sharingan, and it didn't interest him anyway. Mist missing nen, specialty, silent killings within the mist. Overconfident in his own abilities. Best way to defeat him is to trick him and force his hand. Once confused, he'll be easy. Resigned himself to sit outside of this battle. He didn't really want to get so involved in a fight against a Junin anyway. While a thick, heavy cloud of mist surrounded the group from Zabuza's Kirigakure no Jutsu, hidden mist technique, Naruto had closed his eyes and concentrated. When he reopened his eyes, they had become a different shade of violet, enhancing his vision to be able to see through the thick mist. Mixing his original blue chakra and Ninetail's red chakra, to create something like an intermediate chakra with the violet color. Kakashi had tried to calm his students down by telling them he will ensure their safety, but these comforting thoughts were immediately cut off in Naruto's mind as he suddenly pushed the other members of the team away and parried Zabuza's big sword with his own small kunai. Being pushed back by the heavy weight of the big sword, Naruto was relieved that Kakashi had managed to grab onto Zabuza, rendering him immobile, and giving Naruto the time to drag Tazuna away from the fighting. After a few seconds of watching water clones beat water clones, Naruto was slightly disappointed when Kakashi fell easily into Zabuza's water prison trap. He frowned as the new Zabuza water clone disappeared from sight and reappeared instantly in front of him. He easily blocked the water clone's weak kick with one arm and slammed his other hand's palm into the center of the water clone. Using the Jukin style of fighting, he pushed chakra out of that open palm, which resulted in blasting the clone back into water molecules. From the wide-eyed expression on the real Zabuza's face, he seemed surprised that a supposedly weak genin was able to beat his water clone. What did he expect? The water clones are 10 times weaker than the Naruto. If he really wanted to, could very well rival the Mist Junin in strength. Zabuza narrowed his eyes in annoyance and started ranting about his past being the devil and how he had killed all his classmates. Naruto ignored the talk and concentrated on thinking up a plan to free Kakashi. He still didn't want to use his full power against the Mist Junin, so he'll find a way to leave the rest of the fight to his supposed teacher. Coming to a decision, Naruto interrupted Zabuza's continual monologue. Enough with the speeches, are we gonna fight or not? Naruto rolled his eyes at Zabuza's resulting angry expression. Being unable to move from his position holding Kakashi in a prison, Zabuza had made several more water clones, Mizu Bunshins, to fight against Naruto. Naruto rolled his eyes again at Zabuza's dangerous underestimation of his abilities. When Zabuza's clones started running towards him, Naruto performed his favorite seal, Taiyu Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, multiple shadow replication technique. At once, there appeared over 30 Naruto clones clashing against the 10 Zabuza clones. Simply put, the Zabuza clones became overwhelmed and the Naruto clones immediately tried to close in on the real Zabuza. Having seen how his clones were nothing compared to Kakashi's brat of a student, Zabuza decided to try something different. He called upon a tidal wave of water to crush all of Naruto's clones at once. When the water finally subsided, Naruto surprised Zabuza once again when a wind shuriken, K's shuriken, flew past the air at high speeds, aiming straight at Zabuza. Calmly, Zabuza stretched his free hand out and grabbed onto the massive shuriken before it came to close. Thinking that was all the kid had up his sleeve, Zabuza was taken back again when another shuriken detached itself from underneath the one he was holding and continued to fly towards him. Shadow Shuriken no Jutsu. Kasama. Zabuza mentally swore and jumped up quickly, just in the nick of time to avoid the shuriken cutting off his legs. Once again to his shock, the shadow shuriken disappeared into a cloud of smoke revealing the hidden Naruto, whom immediately threw a kunai in Zabuza's direction. Being cornered and having no choice, Zabuza jumped away to avoid the kunai, but it still managed to get a scratch his face. Furious at the damn annoying brat, Zabuza tried to throw the shuriken currently in his hand back towards Naruto but was stopped by the newly freed Kakashi. Naruto, on the other hand, landed lightly on the water's surface, trying to gain his balance. Watching both Zabuza and Kakashi perform the powerful jutsu, Suiryu Dan no Jutsu, Water Dragon Blast no Jutsu, Naruto decided now would be a very good time to leave the vicinity. He quickly left the water's edge just in time to watch both the water dragons cancel each other out. Seeing the torrents of water coming towards them due to the previous assault, Naruto quickly grabbed onto Sakura and Tazuna, one with each hand, yelled at Sasuke to get out of the way just as he himself jumped away to avoid the impact of the water blast. Kakashi then played a genjutsu trick on Zabuza to confuse him, while he completed the seals for Suiten. Dabakufu no Jutsu, Water Element. Water Explosion no Jutsu. Naruto yelled at the rest of the group to hold on to any big trees as tightly as possible, because the resulting force of water almost knocked all of them off their branches. Finally thinking this battle was over, Naruto calmed down slightly. But the peace was interrupted as flying needles suddenly flew across the cleaning and struck through Zabuza's throat, surprising even Naruto. Damn, I didn't even feel his presence at all, Naruto thought as he narrowed his gaze angrily at the intruder, a young hunter nin from the mist. After a long pause for introductions, Naruto narrowed his eyes again as the mist hunter nin picked up the supposedly dead body of Zabuza. If his memories served him right, hunter nins usually burn the body of their victims immediately. This is just when the boy was about to leave their presence, Naruto snapped back at him. Hey, aren't hunter nins usually supposed to burn the body of their victims immediately after death and bring back only the head? The boy stopped moving for just a split second before Kakashi quickly turned around, his eye wide with realization, but it was already too late. The boy had made a few quick hand seals and disappeared with Zabuza's body intact. His voice rang overhead, "Until the next time we meet." Kakashi cursed visibly at his own incompetence, but there was nothing else that could be done. Naruto snarled in anger at being tricked, he didn't like being overmatched. Soon after the impromptu battle, the group decided to leave the area, the sooner the better, but things became complicated again when Kakashi fell unconscious due to exhaustion. Kakashi-sensei, are you alright? What happened? Kakashi-sensei. Sakura screamed in panic, frantically shaking Kakashi's unmoving body. Tazuna, too, became a bit pale at the realization that he only had 3 kids to protect him now, if the Junin was to fall dead. Naruto calmly pressed his fingers against Kakashi's throat, finding his pulse. "He's fine," Naruto emphasized, just exhausted from the overuse of his left eye. Sakura sighed in relief, but the relief didn't last long. "What will we do now if they attack again?" she asked nervously. Sasuke grunted. "We'll just have to beat them up. It's as simple as that." Even though he was already very shaken from simply watching the extraordinary fight between the 2 Junins, but he didn't want to look bad compared to Naruto. Sasuke was raging inside at how calm and collected Naruto had reacted to the whole thing, and he himself had almost ran away as Kakashi had instructed them to do. If he couldn't even withstand watching these types of fights, then he would never be able to even participate, let alone defeat his brother. "No, they won't be coming back so soon anyway," Naruto replied calmly as he stood up and looked at his other 2 teammates. "We have to carry Kakashi back to the village." They looked back at him in silence, waiting. Naruto sighed again. What good are teammates if they don't help each other? He thought as he performed his favorite seal for the second time that day. The Taiyu Cage Bunshin clones easily lifted Kakashi's unconscious body and started walking again. Naruto began leading the group when he was interrupted by an aggravated Sasuke. "Who made you leader? If I remember correctly, you're only an outcast." Sasuke sneered cruelly. He had to find some way of getting rid of his frustration, and it seems easiest to aim the anger at Naruto. Naruto turned around to glare at Sasuke icily. "What do you suggest, then?" "Oh, great and powerful Uchiha-san?" Sasuke immediately became extremely angry. Nobody insults the Uchiha name as my presence." Sakura, seeing the tension building between the boys, decided to intervene. "Sasuke-kun, you know Naruto doesn't mean that. And Naruto, apologies to Sasuke-kun immediately. You have no right to talk like that to Sasuke-kun." Sakura shouted at the blonde boy, hoping he would step down from the challenge. But to her surprise, Naruto only turned his icy gaze back at her. "You have no right to call yourself a shinobi." Sakura blinked in shock at his announcement and was about to rebuff when he interrupted again. "You have been nothing but a burden on your teacher and classmates. You have done nothing to earn the title of shinobi. Until you earn the right to bear that title, you are nothing, Haruno-san. Nothing but a waste of space and time." With that said, Naruto quickly turned around and stormed away with his clones and Kakashi trailing behind him. Sakura stood completely still as Naruto's harsh words slammed into her reality. Nothing but a waste of space and time. Sakura felt herself falling into depression after she realized that Naruto was right. His words struck true. What have I ever done for the good of the team? Nothing. She was snapped out of her musings when Tazuna-san suggested that they all follow Naruto's example and leave, which they did. However, the same thoughts went through both Sasuke and Sakura's minds at the exact moment while they continued traveling to Tazuna-san's home in the Wave Country. I have to become stronger. Finally, they've reached the relative safety of Tazuna-san's own home. There, they met Tsunami, Tazuna-san's daughter, and had Kakashi laid down to rest. However, the tension was still high in the air and everyone realized that even though they've won one battle, they haven't won the war. They all understood that Zabuza and his assistant, the Mist Boy, were still out there, ready to kill them at any time. And with Kakashi out of battle for some time due to his exhausted body, everyone was worried about their future. Kakashi sighed loudly to get his students' attention. It had been a few minutes since his awakening. Knowing he couldn't fight for another week at the minimum, Kakashi understood that he will need the kids to do some of the upcoming battle for him. Even though he was very reluctant to do so, but sometimes you have to do things you don't like. However, he was also very aware that Sasuke and Sakura were not yet ready for these types of demanding battles without at least some intensive training. That idea basically left everything on Naruto's shoulders. Kakashi does not know exactly how strong Naruto really is, but if he had to harbor a guess, Naruto was probably as strong as a Junin level now. So decision made, the hard part was to actually convince Naruto. Kakashi sighed again. This is going to be hard. Naruto. Kakashi called. What? Snapped the irritated Naruto sitting by the window. Can you do me a big favor? Kakashi asked reluctantly. Depends on what this favor entails. Kakashi mentally rolled his eyes. Motivating Naruto to do anything is like trying to push a herd of elephants away from their favorite water source. Very difficult. I need you to train Sasuke and Sakura for me. That comment earned him 3 full death glares. Naruto glared at Kakashi, as if he would ever want to train these pathetic kids. Sasuke glared at Kakashi. He refuses to need this upstart Dobi's help in training him, not to mention he'd rather die than ask for his help anyway. Sakura glared at Kakashi. Their teamwork was already strained enough as it is with an unmotivated Naruto and a slightly selfish Sasuke. To ask Naruto to teach them would be like asking a bird to teach a frog how to fly. It just wasn't probable. But being the logical kid she is, Sakura tried to curb the anger in the room away with some reasoning. But sensei, what is a little training going to do? Our enemy is a ninja you struggled against even with the Sharingan. She persuaded. Sakura, when I was in trouble, it was you guys who came to my rescue and protected Tazuna-san from harm. I have great expectations for all 3 of you. You all have such high potential. Not to mention, I believe that Naruto here, indicating Naruto with his eyes and Naruto scoffed at the attempt to pinpoint him, is just as capable of fighting Zabuza if he really wanted to. Kakashi said evenly. The rest of the house's inhabitants instantly shifted their gaze on the seemingly shortest kid in the lot, but Naruto turned away from their attention and ignored them. Kakashi sighed and tried again. Naruto, you know you're the only one that can teach them right now. There isn't much I can do until I've recovered, and unless you want your own teammates to die, please just teach them some basics so that they could defend themselves. And for the final motivational push, your father would have wanted you to do this. Kakashi added lightly. Naruto swiveled around immediately and glared at Kakashi full force. His voice was icy cold with rage. That's blackmail and manipulation, Kakashi. Kakashi nodded in reply but continued with his reasoning. Yes, it is called manipulation, but it is also the truth. He looked at Naruto evenly, trying to will the child into understanding how important this task actually was. Soon enough, however, Naruto turned around again, showing his tense back as he contemplated whether he should agree or not. A long silence ensued after that, until Naruto broke it with his final statement on this matter. Fine, meet me at the woods south of here at 5 in the morning. Naruto was about to get up and leave the room when he was interrupted by another voice. No amount of training will help you guys. You're all going to die. There's no way you can win against Gato. 2. A whining voice complained from the sidelines. These statements came from a small child, no older than 8 or so. He was later introduced as Inari, Tazuna's grandson and Tsunami's son. Naruto gazed at the boy evenly, then turned around again and proceeded to leave the house. Just before he left though, he told the child, "Only a coward gives up hope when there is still a chance to win." And he left. Naruto needed some peace and quiet while he thought about what to do tomorrow, so he entered the woodland area south of the house. But his musings were interrupted. You know, Inari doesn't really mean what he said. I'm apologizing on his behalf. You shouldn't be out here, old man. It's not safe. Naruto didn't turn around, but his voice addressed the old bridge builder, which was enough for now. I know, but you'll protect me anyway, right? So there isn't any threat. And anyway, if I feel threatened in my very own home, then there really is no place safer, right? Tazuna-san said in amusement, but in a very hollow and cynical sense. I guess, Naruto reluctantly replied back. Hey, I don't mean to intrude or anything. But I'd just like to know y'all a little more, you know. Get to become friends and stuff. The old man continued, shifting nervously. So what do you say to some sake and stuff, huh? Naruto smiled slightly, though he still didn't turn around. I'm not old enough to drink, old man. He answered, slightly amused. Tazuna chuckled. Hey, I forgot that you guys are only 12, nay. Guess I'll have to save up the sake for another 8 years at the very least, HN? 3, thanks. Naruto answered quietly, and finally, decided to turn around and greet his guest properly. Once turned, Tazuna was surprised at the slight smile that graced Naruto's face. In the few days that he had traveled with the young lad, he had never seen Naruto smile. He looked, well, younger when he wasn't scowling at someone or just generally annoyed. The Naruto presented to him right now showed him how truly young he must really be. Still a child and yet so powerful. I wonder what he had been through to become the way he is thought to himself. Tazuna was about to start another conversation when Naruto beat him to the punch. You don't have to worry about me being out here alone. I'm used to it already. Tonight, I'm going to be standing guard around the house and in the surrounding bushlands to make sure no assassins come this way. Don't worry about me. I've done this hundreds of times in the past, so it's really not that difficult for me. I'll be back for breakfast tomorrow and I'll pick you up and protect you on the bridge work as well. Wow, seems the kid has got everything figured out already. But I still feel sorry that everything has been dumped on his shoulders so suddenly. It ain't fair for a kid like him to not smile. Tazuna thought over what Naruto had just said. He came to a conclusion. Done this hundreds of times before? How the kid gets himself into these types of situations. Doesn't seem like his teammates are anywhere near his level of expertise, so they couldn't have been together long. Damn, I'm starting to feel really sorry for the kid. As if reading his mind, Naruto interrupted his thoughts again. What happened in the past already happened, and there is nothing we can do to change it. So just let it go. I've got a busy day tomorrow, so if it wouldn't be too rude to ask, could you please return to the premises, sir? Though sounding like a command, the smirk on Naruto's face indicated his amusement and emphasized the fact that he was being sarcastic. Tazuna gave in, sighed and nodded, then left the boy alone in the woods. Behind him, Naruto lost his smile. Why'd I always push people away? Am I so afraid of being hurt again that I'd rather live alone and without human contact at all? He thought to himself depressingly. Early the next morning, both Sakura and Sasuke arrived at the woodland area that Naruto had instructed them to go to yesterday, to receive their supposed training. It had taken Kakashi a whole night of persuading, but in the end, they had finally agreed that there really was no choice in the matter. If they had to fight against Zabuza and his apprentice again, they would need to become stronger fast. And the quickest way currently was to learn from Naruto. Both of the genins were a bit nervous about the prospect to start off with, but they were also determined to get stronger. Finding Naruto leaning against a tree waiting for them, Sakura and Sasuke stood in rigid stances, apprehensive about what Naruto would be teaching them. Naruto raised his eyebrows and looked at his pupils steadily, analyzing their reactions. After a while, he sighed and rubbed the back of his head with a look of irritation on his face. He really didn't want to do this, but he didn't want them to die either. Standing up straighter, Naruto gazed at both Sasuke's slightly annoyed expression and Sakura's nervous one. For today, we will be doing the tree climbing exercise. Naruto lectured as if he was talking to some 5-year-olds. Sasuke lifted a delicate eyebrow in reaction. You're kidding, right? Climbing trees? He looked at Naruto as if he expected Naruto to grow a second head. Yes, Sasuke. Naruto hissed between clenched teeth. He really didn't want to put up with Sasuke's attitude problem at the ungodly hour of 5 in the morning. I did say treeclimbing, but this exercise is slightly different from what you are thinking about. Sakura blinked in confusion and asked, then what kind of? Trying to find a better term but failed. Tree climbing is it? Climbing trees without the use of hands, Naruto said and then started to demonstrate. Action speaks louder than words anyway, so action it a simple hand seal. Naruto concentrated, pushing the right amount of chakra onto the bottom of his feet. He then started walking up a tree nonchalantly as if he was strolling through a park. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly at the unnatural display and Sakura's mouth hanged open. Hey, if they think this was hard, try doing this on a cliff edge, Naruto silently complained, since that was exactly what he had to do when he was training with Jiraiya. That sadistic bastard, he was, at the time, thrown off a cliff, just for the fun of it. Naruto really hated cliffs. His first encounter with them happened when he had to perform the Kuchiyose no Jutsu and have Gamabunta jump out of the cliff to save his life. Since then, he'd had nothing but bad experiences when dealing with cliffs. With this climbing exercise, he was, once again, thrown off a cliff edge, and was expected to climb his way out, using only his feet. That is, if he didn't die when he reached the ground in the first place. That bastard of a teacher. But I did pay him back pretty good. Naruto smirked silently. Jiraiya's hair had stayed a permanent pink color for months later. Back to the present, Naruto finished his demonstration by ending up standing upside down from a thick branch protruding from the tree. This is how you climb a tree without hands. Naruto waited for his stunned students to recover before he continued. Now it's your turn. Gather chakra around the bottom of your feet and climb a tree. Wait a minute. How does learning how to climb trees supposed to help us become stronger? Sakura asked. Though nervous of Naruto's reactions, she really did want some answers and was willing to get scolded for that. She had always been an inquiring child, always curious as to how things worked and why. So to her, it felt very much like the academy days again, where she would raise her hand and hope the teacher answered her question instead of telling her to be quiet. However, Naruto was not one of those patient teachers working in the academy. He sighed again. Why must they be so bothersome? I'm assuming that both of you know how to channel chakra, right? At their confused nods, he continued. This exercise is to teach you how to control your chakra properly, without wasting it. It forces you to bring out the exact amount of chakra to the exact position on your body, which in turns, help build up your stamina so that you can continue fighting for a lot longer. And also, theoretically, if you can learn this precise control, you should be able to master any jutsu. Seeing that they had nothing else to add, Naruto picked up 2 kunais from his hidden pouch and threw them to the ground, directly in front of Sasuke and Sakura. Use those kunais to mark how high you can make it up a tree before you are no longer able to control yourself. This is an exercise that is learned through trial and error, so I expect the 2 of you to help each other out when you need to. That's all. Firstly, show me how much control you already have. Both Sakura and Sasuke did exactly as they were told. They've already had discussions with one another beforehand about this, and agreed that they were willing to give Naruto the benefit of the doubt for now, because they really didn't know exactly how difficult the training session actually was. Sasuke concentrated on putting the correct amount of chakra on his feet. He ran towards one tree, jumped off the ground, took 3 steps up said tree, but immediately felt his feet cracking against the tree's bark. Marking his progress, Sasuke then jumped down safely. Damn, this is harder than it looks, Sasuke cursed under his breath. Hey, this is actually pretty easy. Both boys looked towards Sakura in shock. She had figured it out almost immediately. The same thought went through both boys' mind. Damn, it took me a full week to be able to reach the top, complained Naruto, slightly jealous at Sakura's natural ability to control her chakra well. Then again, she didn't have a demon sealed inside of thought and excuse. It seems like Sakura is the first one able to control chakra precisely. This comment was aimed directly at Sasuke's pride. It deserves to be wounded a bit, if only to push him to his thought to himself. Alright, continue until you are completely worn out. I want to see how long your stamina can last. After only 10 minutes of watching Sakura go up and down a tree, she collapsed in exhaustion. Damn, her body's chakra amount is so small it's practically useless, Naruto thought disappointingly. Then he looked towards Sasuke's progress. Though not as good as Sakura's handling of chakra, he certainly has a lot of more chakra reserves to spare. Damn, I'm going to have to leave them to train alone and do my guard duty over Tazuna thought, looking at the rising sun. Sakura, Naruto called as he jumps down from his upside-down perch, which he had never really left since his demonstration. Sakura looked up at him in surprise, wondering what he wanted. After Naruto lands lightly on the ground, he stood straight up and looked over Sakura's exhausted body with a critical eye. No, this will most definitely not do. Sakura, your control over chakra is almost perfect. But your greatest weakness lies in your limited chakra reserve. You need to build up a lot more stamina if you wish to fully participate in any battle. He stated firmly. Sakura nodded in silent reply. She knew that she was the weakest in the group, but didn't know how else to change that fact. She just didn't have enough chakra to do practically anything other than the basic stuff you learn in the academy. How can I build up my chakra reserves then? Naruto-kun. Even Sakura had to admit that the training wasn't as bad as she'd feared. And being able to do something useful for once really did help her self-confidence. She really does want to help the others in battle, and to do that, she had to become stronger. Naruto sighed, shaking his head a bit but decided to tell her the truth. It requires intensive taijutsu training. Once you build up enough physical stamina, your spiritual stamina will also increase automatically. But I won't lie to you, Sakura. To do that in such a small amount of time, will require seriously intensive physical exercises. Sakura shivered a bit at the explanation. Am I ready for that? I don't know. But looking back at Naruto's determined eyes, Sakura finally made a decision. I won't be left behind. Sasuke-kun will master how he controls chakras soon and then. I'll be the only one that can't participate in any battles. I don't want that. I need to become that mental preparation." Sakura nodded in acceptance. "I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Naruto nodded back in satisfaction, and smiled gently at her, proud of her dedication and courage. He then turned around to address Sasuke and his chakra exercise, leaving Sakura to get some more rest before he puts her through intensive training. Unbeknownst to him, when he had turned, Sakura's eyes had widened in surprise. That was the first time he had ever smiled in her presence, in the entire time that she had known him as a teammate. He looks younger. When he finally thought, though nowhere as wide as Sasuke-kun's smile, if he ever did smile naturally and not that smirk. Naruto's smile was genuine. It wasn't faked, and it was most definitely not made a silent promise to herself then. She wants to improve the relationship between the members of Team 7 so that they will never feel so isolated again, especially Naruto. She really wanted all three of them to work as a team. "Sasuke," called Naruto. Sasuke looked up at Naruto from his resting on the ground. He was currently breathing heavily with slight exhaustion. He had reached halfway up the tree, though he was still disappointed that Sakura could be better than him in that respect. Naruto decided to give him some tips. He may not like Sasuke Uchiha very much, but he didn't want the kid to die just because of his own incompetence. It would be a waste for the sole survivor of the Uchiha tragedy to die in such a dishonorable way. "Listen, Sasuke. Chakra uses spiritual energy as well as physical energy, so you can't get too excited. To gather chakra on your feet, you have to relax and focus on the tree. Don't give in to your frustrations or anger. If you do, you will never improve." "I know that," snapped and irritated Sasuke. He did know all that, but it was still difficult for him to concentrate. With the added pressure knowing that Sakura had already reached the top and Naruto was way out of his league, Sasuke was starting to feel slightly inferior to his two teammates, and this thought was not helping his mood. Naruto silently seethed. "I'm trying to help you, you bastard prick." Taking a deep breath, Naruto forcefully calmed himself down enough to continue with his tip. Even without Sasuke's outwardly acceptance, he still had to help the kid because he had already agreed to it. And by God, Naruto Uzumaki does not go back on his words. "Your biggest problem, Sasuke, is your superiority complex. Can't you just accept that people are different? You cannot compare people and state that one is stronger than another simply because they each have their own strengths and weaknesses. What gives a man true strength is his will to face a seemingly impossible conflict and deal with it. Using anger and hate to fuel your power will bring you nothing but suffering, and believe me, I know that pain very well. If you give in to your darkness, you will become nothing but a murdering monster. You won't even be human," Naruto exclaimed, exasperated with the infuriating boy. Sasuke glared at Naruto full force. His anger wasn't just due to the fact that Naruto had insulted him directly and without pause, it was also because Naruto had hit a little bit too close to home with his words. Yes, he had been using hate and anger to fuel his ambition to kill his brother. But who gave Naruto the right to tell him what to do with his life? How dare Naruto tell him what he was doing is wrong? But with every word that escaped Naruto's lips, Sasuke knew they were all true. Deep inside of him, the small child that he once was, shivered in fright as the cruel words bombarded against his thin protective shield. In the present, before Sasuke could snarl back in automatic response, Sakura butted in, trying to calm the storm before it explodes. "Guys, stop it. We're supposed to work as a team here. A team. That means that we help each other, not try to kill each other. Please stop arguing." Both Naruto and Sasuke had stopped talking when Sakura butted into the conversation, but they were still standing rigidly, and the tension in the air was still high. Sighing, Sakura understood that it was up to her to keep her team together. No matter what it takes, she won't let them be isolated again. "Sasuke-kun, please just listen to Naruto for once. Just because I can control my own chakra slightly better than you doesn't mean anything. It might be because I have so little chakra to control in the first place, and I don't have any special bloodline abilities either. So there really isn't any comparison at all." Turning to Naruto, Sakura continued her reasoning. "And Naruto-kun, can you please be a little bit more patient with us? We're not like you. We don't know all these things and are just starting to grasp the concepts of them. I know that we don't have time, but we are doing the best we can." Sakura explained softly. A long silence ensures, but Naruto finally decided to break the ice. I apologize, Sakura-san, Sasuke-kun. I'm not used to traveling with a group. And to rebuff your suggestion, Sakura, I too took a very long time to master all these things, so I know what you guys are going through. However, since I am new at this teaching, cursing Kakashi mentally, I'll try to be a bit more lenient, but I also expect you two to give it your all. Now, it was both Naruto and Sakura's turn in waiting for Sasuke's reply. It took a while, but Sasuke finally beat his own stubbornness into submission and stated a short, "Sorry. I'll try harder." Naruto sighed, knowing that Sasuke won't be changing his attitude and way of life anytime soon. Oh well, at least we're not at each other's necks anymore. Looking up at the sun, Naruto realized that a lot of time had flown by. Almost an hour had passed since the beginning of the training, and he still had to get back to guard over Tazuna. Giving Sasuke an even look, Naruto surrendered. "Fine, Sasuke. Return to what you were doing before. And when you are able to go up and down the trees easily for close to 1 full hour without stressing, I'll start teaching you jutsus and stuff." Both Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise. Naruto is going to teach me jutsus? Naruto turned around then and left Sasuke to his own exercises. He walked towards Sakura, whom had just recovered from her previous exhaustion. Okay, now what to do with Sakura? A light bulb went up in Naruto's head and he immediately changed direction, walking towards his backpack, of which he had brought with him the night before into the forest. He took out 2 worn-looking, long, common gray cloths. "Sakura, come over here." Sakura did as she was told. "Tie these cloths around your fingers and palm like a bandage." Once again, Sakura followed his instructions word for word but didn't understand the reason behind these actions. Noting Sakura's confusion, Naruto explained, "For today only, I'll give you some simple exercises that will test your physical body and tire you out but won't hurt you much. First, I'll expect you to do at least 100 push-ups by the end of the day. I don't care how many breaks you take as long as that 100 push-ups is reached. And another thing, to improve the power of your punches, I want you to continuously punch this tree," indicating the big tree behind him, "until you leave a dent at least half an inch thick into the tree. The cloths are to protect your knuckles and fingers from bruising too much." Sakura's eyes widened at Naruto's order. 100 push-ups will probably make her completely exhausted, and then she still had to punch a tree. Opening her mouth to complain about the difficulty of the second command, she was cut off as Naruto grinned at her and slammed his open palm onto another tree just next to him. The sudden impact sent slight shockwaves into the ground and plenty of leaves started falling from said tree. When Naruto finally removed his hand, a finely detailed handprint was revealed on the surface of the tree. It had a dent 1 inch deep from the surrounding bark. Both Sakura and Sasuke underwent shock at Naruto's show of power. There was absolutely no chakra involved in that slam. Naruto stood relaxed in front of his pupils as they tried to recover from their surprise. Eventually, he grew tired of their silence. "Well, that's it for today. I've got to go protect Tazuna-san while he works on the bridge. The 2 of you stay here and train. You may return to the house for lunch, dinner and snacks if you are too tired. That's all. If you guys have improved sufficiently enough within the week, then I might consider teaching you new stuff. But don't expect to learn them too fast." With that said, he left his teammates in the woodland and left on his mission. Reaching the house, he made a small greeting to Tazuna, Tsunami and Kakashi, ignoring the irritable brat sitting by the table. He had his late breakfast and was off with Tazuna-san to work. Standing guard all day was incredibly boring. Naruto had created several clones to guard the place from all corners. But since nothing was actually happening, Naruto almost fell asleep while on his post. He woke up abruptly due to some commotion between the builders. It seemed one of them chickened out and didn't want to take the risk of his life, and so he wanted to quit. "Hey, Naruto." But as he studied the man's face more clearly, as well as the expression on Tazuna-san's face, he realized something. They're scared, not just for their lives, but also for old man Tazuna too. They're worried about Tazuna-san was determined to bring hope back into the Wave Country residents by finishing this bridge. No matter what they said, he refused to give in. "Is that what my father was like?" wondered Naruto for no particular reason. He knew that the cost might be too high but still determined to continue on. refusing to give in to the fear but resigned that others may not feel the side and shook his head to clear his mind. He really didn't need to think about this right now. After Tazuna-san had finished his shift with bridge building, the two of them decided to walk down the streets of the Wave Country, going grocery shopping. Naruto was very surprised at the number of people walking around holding signs that say they would willingly take any job available. Yes, he had been to the Wave Country before, but it wasn't like this back then. Then again, the last time he had been here, it was several years ago. Gadu had not shown his head back then. Walking into the grocery shop, Naruto became even more depressed as he looked at the range of rotten vegetables and its limited number. All the children outside would thought depressingly. However, in that moment, he felt someone trying to get close to him. Wanting to cause a scene, Naruto turned around quickly and sent a glare at the would-be thief. The thief became scared under the scrutiny of Naruto's deadly glare and ran away. Walking back to Tazuna-san's home, they were stopped again by a small orphaned girl, to which Naruto gave her his entire pack of energy bars. He wasn't a child anymore and didn't carry candies, but the ninja energy bars would most definitely sustain the child and her friends for a few days at the very least. Tazuna-san then took the opportunity to explain their country's hopeless situation and that the only hope left was to complete that bridge. Hope is the strongest of all human emotion. It was that night, during dinner, that Naruto felt slightly different from what he usually felt in the midst of strangers. For most of his life, the only person he would ever willingly sit next to while eating was the pervert Sennin himself. Naruto may not admit it, but the murder attempt on his life while he was 6 had permanently scarred him psychologically. He doesn't trust people enough to sit next to them and eat, especially strangers. Most of the time, he would order food, then find some place else to sit and eat in silence. This was probably the first time he had ever eaten food with so many people before, Iruka not included of course. Naruto found it to be a surprisingly pleasant feeling. He relaxed in the company and continued to eat his food slowly and silently, while watching Sasuke and Sakura chow their food down, eating slightly more than usual. Once they both finished with their first bowl, they asked for seconds. Kakashi wondered at that and decided to ask, "Sasuke, Sakura, what's gotten into you two? You usually don't eat so much." "No, we have to eat," said Sasuke punctually, smirking slightly at the dumbfounded expression on Kakashi's face. "We're gonna need a lot of energy to continue the training, so we'll need all the nutrients we can get, Kakashi-sensei," added Sakura proudly. Though completely bruised from head to toe, Sakura seemed to be in an incredibly good mood. Both Kakashi and Naruto nodded in acceptance, feeling quite proud that Sasuke and Sakura were getting along so well and were probably improving a lot too. After dinner, it was Sakura that asked about the picture on the wall. Unbeknownst to her, the tension in the room heightened slightly. The statements that follow led to Inari's subsequent leaving of the table and made the rest of the ninja group curious. Well, Naruto was curious but not bad enough to stick his head into other people's business. After Tazuna-san's sad story of Inari's father, the room fell into complete silence. Naruto was the first to move. He stepped confidently towards the door. But before Kakashi could ask him what he was doing, Naruto answered back, "I'm keeping watch tonight as well. So the rest of you can go to sleep without worry. I'll expect Sakura and Sasuke tomorrow morning, same time, same place." And with that said, he left. Several days passed in this fashion. Starting from 5 in the morning, Naruto would instruct Sasuke and Sakura what they would be doing for the rest of the day. By 7, Naruto would leave with Tazuna-san to work and guard him there. After work, they would go grocery shopping and return home to rest. After dinner, Naruto would instruct Sakura and Sasuke to rest plenty because the next day would be even harder. And then he would leave to do his watch of night duty. For a week, this went on, but by the end of the week, everyone had become slightly worried over Naruto's health. Yes, he did finish his breakfast, lunch and dinner, but he hadn't been getting enough sleep and the dark shadows around his eyes are proof of that. Even Sasuke was starting to be slightly concerned over his droopy-eyed expression. Kakashi had asked Naruto, or ordered him, to rest for a while and let the other two take over or just simply stop doing the night duties, but Naruto had vehemently refused. His argument back was that, now would be the perfect time for the enemy to attack because Zabuza would be close to full recovery. Not to mention that he had made a promise and he always kept his promises. Kakashi almost regretted the fact that he had conned Naruto into this situation and was forced into reluctantly agree to let the teen do as he pleased. The only thing Kakashi and the other two genins could do now was to try and get stronger or better as soon as possible to relieve Naruto of his burden. Time passed. Kakashi was slowly recovering, and both Sakura and Sasuke had improved tremendously. After the first 5 days of either practicing tree climbing or physical training, both were given the opportunity to learn something new. Naruto opted to teach them how to enhance normal weapons such as a kunai with chakra. Flashback. Okay, listen up, Sasuke, since you've got more chakra in reserve and your aim is already pretty good, I'll be teaching you how to enhance the power of a kunai using chakra. And Sakura, since you are better at controlling the chakra flow, I'll be teaching you how to enhance the control over the direction of the kunai using chakra. The concept may be the same but the end result is completely different. Here, he demonstrated the effects of each. First, Naruto threw a normal kunai at a tree and it embedded itself into the tree like normal. Next, he enhanced another kunai with chakra and threw that at the same tree. This kunai's power had been enhanced and so, it easily smashed its way right through the tree's thick trunk completely. That's the difference between a normal kunai and a chakra-enhanced kunai for power. Naruto looked back at his stunned students. But he did not pause to let the information sink in. Naruto performed a seal quickly and formed a bunshin. When he threw a normal kunai towards his very own clone, the clone dodged out of the way, easily missing the kunai by a mile. Next, he showed them the same kunai, enhancing it with chakra and threw it once again at the clone. The clone jumped away to miss the kunai but the kunai suddenly changed direction in mid-air and flies back towards the clone again. The clone managed to dodge against the kunai several times until it ran out of room to dodge and became lodged in the back with said kunai, disappearing into a cloud of smoke. And that is the difference between a normal kunai and a kunai enhanced with chakra for control. It's also called the chakra-seeking kunai, because it follows the opponent until it is embedded into something with a high amount of chakra, or you can direct it with your own chakra using manipulation techniques. Naruto concluded his demonstration. End flashback. It had taken the two several more days but they finally managed to learn those techniques as well. As expected, Sasuke had taken to the power-enhanced kunais more while Sakura always preferred the enhanced control over the movement of the kunai, instead of the power it exerts. After those practices, Naruto had also taught them some useful but low-level jutsu that aren't very well known. These jutsu do not take up much chakra and can be used easily like the basic academy jutsus. Sakura was taught how to disguise herself with invisibility genjutsu as well as how to create illusionary bunshins to trick the opponent into thinking that they were real cage bunshins. Both these tricks do not use up much chakra so Sakura was able to perfect them easily. Sasuke, on the other hand, opted for more offensive jutsus. He had learnt Naruto's own original jutsu called Raikon Mahi no Jutsu, lightning shock paralysis, which when used in conjunction with taijutsu was very deadly and effective. Basically, chakra is forced into the palm of the user's hands and then converted into electricity. When used in hand-to-hand combat, anywhere the user touches his opponent with his chakra-infused hands, the opponent will be shocked with a burst of lightning and will be paralyzed for a time, enabling the user to finish him off easily. The longer the user has a hold on his opponent, the longer and more painful the shock and paralysis. After that, Naruto asked them to find some time to spar against one another. Their different styles complemented each other. Sakura would usually be defensive and used tricks to get around her opponent. Sasuke, being physically stronger, prefers to use all-out hand-to-hand combat skills and be more offensive. The two of them had learned, in a very short time, how to work as an efficient team. However, because, for most of the time, Naruto wasn't with them, their teamwork with the blonde was still slightly strained but they've all learned how to respect and trust each other throughout the training period. Finally, one day almost 2 weeks after their fight with Zabuza, Naruto was found sleeping, lying on the ground against a tree with his arms wrapped around his knees. This was the sight that greeted Haku, early in the morning as he went to pick the herbal weeds he needed. Deciding he should wake the boy up even though Haku easily recognized Naruto as one of the leaf ninjas that had fought Zabuza-san, but he didn't want to fight right now. As Haku's hand reached closer and closer towards a sleeping Naruto, he was completely surprised when Naruto's hand immediately snapped up and grabbed onto Haku's wrist tightly. It was then that Naruto started yawning widely while waking up groggily. Naruto looked up with bleary eyes at a stranger. Who are you? Haku smiled gently. I'm just a villager. I saw you sleeping here on this uncomfortable ground, so I thought I would wake you. Naruto realized he was still holding onto Haku's hand and immediately let go of it. Then, he gave another mouth-splitting yawn and stretched his arms to the sides. Scratching his head sheepishly, Naruto grinned at the boy. Sorry about that. It would actually be safer if you called me up from a distance away. Haku blinked innocently, but he also noticed the dark circles that surrounded Naruto's normally vibrant blue eyes. You look really tired. Maybe you should just return to sleep. I won't bother you this time. Naruto shook his head and smiled. No thank you. I can't sleep now. I've still got some training to get done. Haku looked at him curiously again, then made as if he only just recognized the ninja head protector. That head protector. Are you a ninja? Naruto tapped the head protector strapped around his head proudly. Yep. Wow, you must be really strong. Haku said, amazed. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly and looked at the ground instead, as if ashamed. I guess. Haku blinked in confusion. You don't seem very enthusiastic about being a ninja. Why? He asked curiously. Naruto shrugged helplessly again as he continued to focus on the ground and let the silence stretch. Haku had almost given up hope for any answer and started shifting around to gather the herbs he wanted. He was again shocked when he heard Naruto whisper. Do you know that sometimes people are born with a destiny that they don't like and can't change? 1. Haku, with his back to Naruto, nodded in understanding, though was still slightly taken back and tense around the subject that Naruto was talking about currently. I'm one of those people. I have a burden in which only I carry and no one else. Because of that, I can't trust people. I don't let them get close. And then, I become lonely. Again Haku nodded in understanding, still with his back to Naruto. This conversation is bringing back a whole shitload of bad memories. I thought I put all of these memories behind thought sadly as he tried to imagine what Naruto had gone through in his life. So, I decided to change myself. Now I'm a ninja. I have to become strong. And I have to find some answers. Concluded Naruto. 2. Pipped with curiosity and intrigue, Haku asked. Is it for your benefit or are you fighting for someone else? Another long silence ensued. I don't know exactly. Sometimes, it's purely for me. But sometimes, I just don't want others to be hurt. Taking a deep breath of courage, Haku turned around to face Naruto once again. He was surprised at the amount of sadness reflected in those lonely blue eyes. Taking another deep breath, he asked, do you have someone who is important to you? This time, it was Naruto's turn to look confused. Haku giggled at his expression and decided to elaborate. When a person has something important to protect, that's when they can truly become strong. Naruto took some time to think about that statement. It's the same thing that pervert Sennin said to looking at Haku. Naruto answered the original question. I can understand, but I guess, I'm still looking for my most precious person. Or, in a way, my most precious person is no longer within my reach. Father. Haku nodded again, then stood up and started walking away, indicating that he had gathered enough herbs and needed to get going. You will become strong. Let's meet again somewhere sometime. Yep, Naruto called out after him. Oh, and one more thing. I'm a boy. Haku smiled as he continued on his way. I know. Naruto smirked behind him. As Haku walked away, Sasuke came in the opposite direction and looked over Haku suspiciously but ignored it as a coincidence. A few hours later, while Naruto has gone with Tazuna-san to the bridge, Kakashi decided to check up on his student's progress. He made his way towards the woodlands and followed the sounds of fighting that he could hear. Upon reaching the clearing that Naruto had used to teach Sasuke and Sakura, he was shocked at seeing his two students sparring against one another. Sakura jumped from a perch on a tree, holding a kunai tightly in her hand. She then landed perfectly on top of Sasuke, whom also had a kunai in his hand. A high-pitched sound resulted from the impact of the two kunais striking each other. Sasuke then pulled his full weight against Sakura's kunai, and since he was heavier, he was able to push Sakura off of him. Sakura jumped off gracefully, finishing a somersault in midair and landed onto the ground lightly. Both then threw their kunais at each other. Sasuke decided to take a defensive stance while Sakura ran towards him in a charge. The kunai that Sasuke threw at Sakura was charged with chakra, increasing its power, so when it struck against Sakura's kunai, it forced Sakura's kunai off course and continued on its journey towards Sakura. However, Sakura was too fast and she immediately stepped toward the side to avoid the kunai with her speed. Sasuke's kunai impacted onto the ground and a resulting explosion can be heard throughout the woods. The crater of the impact was at least a meter wide. Sasuke grunted at his missed opportunity but had to duck quickly to avoid Sakura's previous kunai, which was charged with chakra to maintain control. The kunai changed direction again in mid-air and heads back towards Sasuke, who was doing his best to avoid the flying kunai. Ducking, dodging, sidestepping and jumping, Sasuke just managed to avoid the kunai each time. He became so focused on the kunai that he did not immediately see Sakura running towards him in high speed from his blind spot. Sakura suddenly appeared beside Sasuke and punched him in the face with all her power behind it. Sasuke took the punch, but immediately formed a small set of seals afterwards. Chakra was then formed on his right hand and he struck her in the stomach with it while he was thrown back from the impact of her punch. Sakura, too, fell onto the ground due to Sasuke's attack, which led the two of them into a tie. Oi! Very good moves, Sakura. Impressive maneuvering, Sasuke called Kakashi to his students as he clapped his hands in appreciation. However, he was curious about the seal that Sasuke had performed against Sakura, because in all his years, Kakashi had never seen it before. Sasuke, what jutsu is that, the one you just used? He asked. It's called Raikon Mahi no Jutsu. It changes chakra into electricity and shocks the opponent while paralyzing them. Sasuke answered breathlessly, his jaw still in pain due to Sakura's punch. I see. Kakashi nodded. Must be one of Naruto's original jutsus. Damn, wish I had my Sharingan on just then. Oh well, there'll be other opportunities. Kakashi looked over his students and was highly impressed at how much they have grown. Just watching the previous fight, Kakashi was able to determine that both of them have improved on their speed and strength. Sasuke had also become exceptionally fast, almost as fast as Naruto, or as fast as the Naruto that had fought against Kakashi that first time. Kakashi was still unsure how fast or powerful Naruto actually is. Sakura, too, had improved tremendously. Her petite little body had developed quite a lot of firm muscles around, indicating that she had been very hard at work doing physical exercises every day. Not to mention they were both pretty good fighters now. Soon, they will be able to finally give Naruto the time to rest and sleep properly in a real bed, as the three of them would take over all the night watches and day guards. Kakashi, himself, had almost completely recovered. That night, Naruto literally slumped onto the chair and table due to his fatigue. Even he had to admit those 2 weeks of hardly any sleep and continual watch and teaching duty was wearing him thin with exhaustion. The others, sitting around the dinner table, all looked at him with varying signs of worry in their eyes. Even though Sasuke and Sakura have been training hard, but at least they received decent amounts of sleep and food every day. Naruto wasn't even eating properly anymore due to his tiredness, making him have no appetite for food. The only occupant in the house that didn't look at Naruto in worry was Inari. He glared hatefully at Naruto from across the table as his mother served his food. Finally, without reason, Inari just couldn't take it anymore and decided he needed to shout at someone to release his pent-up frustration, anger and hurt. Naruto just so happened to become the lucky contestant to bear the blunt of it. With tears leaking from his eyes, Inari shouted at Naruto. Why do you guys bother to try so hard? No matter how hard you train, you're still no match for Gadu's men. No matter what glorious claim you make or how hard you work, when facing the strong, the weak will only end up getting killed. Everyone was shocked at Inari's sudden outburst, but Naruto just ignored it all and buried his head in his arms on the table. A softly spoken word was all his answer. Whatever. Inari's passionate shouts continued. I'd hate to be like you. You don't know anything about this country, yet you're being so nosy. You are completely different from me. You don't know how hard life can be. Naruto's temper flared at the last sentence. He slammed his hand down onto the table so hard that the entire room reverberated with the shockwave, Surprisingly, the table was still intact after the impact. Naruto gazed steadily at the tearful Inari and said in a softly but icy voice. So it's okay for you to pose as the star of a tragedy and cry all day? Then just keep on crying forever, you cry baby. Inari's lips trembled at the coldness of his words. I'm glad I'm not like you. Because if I were, I would have committed suicide a long time ago. A long pause settled in the room, for no one else had anything to add, nor do they know how to cut the thick tension hanging in the air. Most of them, with the exception of Kakashi, didn't understand why Naruto had said what he said. Naruto continued with his argument in an icy tone. Don't you ever tell me I don't know how hard life can be. Because I do know. Inari's eyes widened slightly as Naruto's own eyes started turning slightly amethyst in color. And I accept it. Finally finished with what he wanted to say, Naruto turned around abruptly and left the room, mumbling something about finally sleeping in a real bed. Kakashi had already spoken with him beforehand, stating that Naruto would stay at home for the next few days to get his strength up while the other three would take turns to do all the other duties. Once Naruto had left, the silence continued. Kakashi, unable to contain the silence, broke it with his own assurances. Inari. When the boy didn't look up, Kakashi decided to keep going anyway. Naruto didn't mean any harm by what he said. It's probably just the stress that he's been under lately that has pushed him to say those words. Don't worry about it, okay? However, these words did little to alleviate the tension. Everyone did eventually continued on with their meal, but in complete silence. Naruto didn't even touch his dinner, again. That same night but much later, found Inari and Kakashi sitting outside in the docks together. Kakashi tried to find a way to broach the subject at hand and decided to start with the obvious. Tazuna-san told us about your father. Seeing some reaction, Kakashi continued. Like you, Naruto also grew up without a father. Actually, he's never known any of his parents and he's never even had a single friend either. Jiraiya is considered his guardian and Iruka is practically his brother, so no, Naruto does not have any friends. The truth is, he's had a rougher past than you. Better not mention the part about the murder, Kakashi. Huh? Came Inari's confused expression. Kakashi looked into Inari's sad eyes and emphasized his next point. But I have never seen him cry or complain. Pausing for effect. It's because of that. Looks for the right word, isolation, that sometimes he doesn't trust people. It's a very lonely existence he'd had to live through. But he's still trying to fit in, to care, to be in a group, and to earn that group's acknowledgement. He's probably sick and tired of crying and being alone. He knows what it really means to be strong, perhaps even more so than your father or myself. Naruto may understand your feelings better than anyone, commented Kakashi. What? Inari's eyes showed a little bit of indignation and refusal, not understanding how Kakashi could compare him to Naruto. Kakashi smiled at him indulgently. Because even though he doesn't show it, Naruto doesn't seem to be able to be not concerned about you. I remember I overheard Jiraiya-sama saying something about Naruto having a major weakness when it came to kids in pain, especially the younger ones. The next day, Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke and Tazuna all set off towards the bridge. Naruto was left in the house to finally have some peace and quiet to sleep. Naruto awakened to the sounds of bird chirping happily outside of his window as well as the bright sunshine beaming onto his face. He blinked groggily, deciding to turn away from the light and bury himself under the blankets again. What's wrong with me? Naruto blinked several times and finally gazed blearily at his current surrounding. An unfamiliar room. His mind slowly rose to conscious level and he realized that this is his room, the one he had never used until now. Oh, that's why it's so much more comfortable than the forest, thought as he closed his eyes in tiredness, allowing himself to fall asleep again. After a few long minutes of just lying on his futon, covered by blankets, Naruto realized that there was no way he could go back to sleep. He had always been a very energetic person, so once he's up indefinitely. There's no point in staying in bed. I'm just avoiding Naruto knew that he still didn't want to deal with the Inari issue from last night. I suppose I should apologize. Some of the things I've said weren't necessary. After a few more moments spent on reviewing his words last night, Naruto decided that he really didn't want to do it now. I'll apologize later, just not now. Recognizing it as just an excuse, Naruto was still too hungry and too tired to bother pushing the subject at hand. I didn't even finish my dinner last. Naruto mentally. After leaving his comfortable haven, Naruto set out to brush his teeth, comb his hair, change his clothes and finally, decided that he was ready to face the outside world. Upon reaching the kitchen, Naruto only found Tsunami there. "Oh, Naruto-kun, you're finally awake." Tsunami smiled at him, as if the events of last night didn't even faze her. "Your breakfast is already prepared. I'll just bring it out for you now." And she set about doing just that. Naruto sat nervously on the chair next to the empty table as Tsunami served him his well-earned food. He expected at least some backlash from the way he acted towards her son yesterday night and didn't really like the fact that they're all ignoring the problem. Sighing, Naruto decided to be the first to broach the subject at hand. About last night. I'm really sorry. I didn't. It's quite alright," Tsunami interrupted. Naruto only managed to blink back at her wide-eyed in response. She giggled at his expression and made to sit down beside him on the table. "Listen, Naruto. I don't blame you for reacting like that last night. I know you've been under a lot of stress lately. And frankly, Inari kinda deserved that. He really needed someone to force the truth on him, and I'm just not strong enough to do that." Tsunami looked down sadly. "I'm glad you said what you said, though not the way you said it. One way or the other, he needed to hear it. And for that, I thank you for having the courage in doing that." After that finished statement, Tsunami returned to doing what she was doing beforehand, and Naruto was left alone to contemplate what had just happened while he finished his breakfast in a mechanical fashion. It wasn't ramen after all, so he didn't need to show any enthusiasm towards eating it. After his late breakfast, Naruto decided to take a stroll outside. "Is he gone?" Inari whispered to his mother in the kitchen. "Yes, dear. Naruto went out for a walk," answered Tsunami. Inari sighed and sat at the same table that Naruto had just left only moments ago. A long silence ensued as Inari tried to find something to talk about. Finding none, he shook his head in frustration and started getting up off the chair and left the kitchen to go to his room. Half an hour later, Tsunami got two very unexpected visitors. Two of Gatu's henchmen, wearing samurai-like clothes, sliced their way through the front door of Tazuna's home and started walking in as if they owned the place. Tsunami was shocked and scared, knowing that she was currently helpless without the added protection of the ninjas. She of course froze in fear. The men asked her if she was Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter. She nodded jerkingly in reply. They smiled savagely at her and grabbed onto her arms, telling her that she had become their hostage from now on. Inari, hearing his mother's scream while still in his bedroom, ran towards the sound to investigate. As a result, he found the kitchen and living room trashed and his mother shivering in fear on the floor, arms being grabbed tightly by two strangers with swords strapped onto their belts. "Mom!" Inari screamed in fright. "What? A kid?" One of the men seemed surprised. "Inari, don't come near me. Run away!" Tsunami shrieked, knowing that whatever happens to her doesn't matter, as long as Inari is safe. "Should we take him too?" the same man asked the other. "We only need one hostage," answered his partner. "Heh, should I kill him?" The first man sneered viciously, striding towards a shivering Inari on the ground. The ugly-looking man slowly but surely pulled his long sword out, ignoring Tsunami's desperate shouts in the background. Inari shook violently in fear and started crying as he watched the two men descend on him. "Wait, if you touch that child, I will bite my tongue and kill myself. You hear me? You want a hostage, right? Then leave him alone." Tsunami screamed to catch both men's attention, and showed her determination in doing just as she had threatened if they did not comply. After a moment of silence, the man pushed his sword back where it belonged and started walking away, leaving a sniveling Inari where he had kneeled over in fear and resignation. "Hey, thank your mom, kid." As the two men continued to mumble to each other and dragged a reluctant Tsunami away, all Inari did was kneel on the floor and cry. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm weak. I couldn't protect you. And I don't want to die. I'm afraid and scared. I don't want to die." That was the moment when memories of Naruto's words came back. "So it's okay for you to pose as the star of a tragedy and cry all day? Then just keep on crying forever, you cry baby." Kakashi's previous words also added to the effect. He's probably sick and tired of crying and being alone. He knows what it really means to be strong, perhaps even more so than your father or myself. And so did his late father's words. If it's really precious, even if you lose your life, you must protect it with these two hands. They're all so incredible, so cool, and so strong. Will I also be able to become strong? Dad? With each thought, more flashes of memories, good ones, bad ones, all flicked in Inari's mind, helping him make one final choice. Inari rubbed his eyes clear of the tears that had plagued him for years. It's time I stop being a cry-baby. Wait, shouted Inari as he ran towards the two men and his mother with determination blazing in his eyes. I will not run. I cannot run. I'm not running away anymore. It's that kid. The first man who had threatened to kill Inari said in astonishment and amusement. Inari, what are you doing? Shrieked Tsunami in fear. No, don't come here. Run, Inari. Run away. I won't run anymore. Let go of my mom. Inari bellowed in anger. Cut him, ordered the man who rarely spoke. Sure, smiled the first, eager to finally get some action. Inari, screamed Tsunami in fright. Just as the two men raised their swords, intending to slice Inari into pieces, they were both surprised that what they had cut in their haste was nothing more than pieces of wood. Kawarimi no jutsu? Went through both men's mind as a new voice joined their confusion. Sorry for being late, but great job, Inari. A slightly tired Naruto smiled genuinely back at Inari, whom was looking at him with shock written over his face. Tsunami was also safely taken away from the two henchmen as she was now sitting behind a relaxed Naruto. The two men were obviously furious at being tricked by a brat and started charging towards Naruto in rage. Naruto stood confidently in front waiting for them. Are you going to be okay? Asked a nervous Inari, looking back and forth between Naruto and the charging men. I'm fine. I wouldn't even have to lift a finger. Naruto smirked as several cage bunchins, shadow clones, suddenly jumped out of the surrounding water, and some even appearing behind the henchmen themselves. After a few seconds of fighting, the clones triumphantly disappeared into smoke, leaving behind two very battered and bruised men. How did you know these samurais were coming here? Asks Inari curiously. There was a cut-up boar in the forest. And a bunch of trees had sword marks on them as well. The marks were heading this way, so I got worried. But I still stayed behind a while to help heal the injured boar, since it wasn't dead yet. And I rushed back here as fast as I could, explained Naruto sheepishly. Actually, he had to take a slight rest after healing the boar. He had exerted himself quite a bit to reach here in time. He's still very tired from his 2 weeks of almost no sleep and very limited food. A slight pause and silence followed. Naruto took a deep breath and tried to broach the original subject, that he dreaded, again, Inari. Huh? Asked Inari, uncertain. Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly. About yesterday. I'm sorry. I didn't mean those words. Just forget it, okay? Breathing in another gulp of courage, Naruto reached out and rubbed Inari's head affectionately. The last time he's done that was on Ellie's, head, which was more than 2 years ago. I was wrong, you are strong. Naruto's final words brought Inari to tears. Inari's eyes widened in surprise and started building up with moisture. Damn it, I decided I wasn't going to cry anymore. You're going to make fun of me and call me a cry baby. Inari struggled to stop the tears. Naruto pulled him in for a hug. I never said it was wrong to cry, just don't cry all the time. People cry for different reasons, because they're scared, angry, hurt, happy and so on. Sometimes, it's good to release your emotions in tears. Just, never give up hope. It's okay to cry when you're happy. Inari hugged Naruto back in relief. Without letting go of Inari, Naruto looked back at the beaten-up henchmen. If they're here, then Kakashi, Sasuke and Sakura would also have their hands full right about now. I'm gonna go and help them. Looking back at a smiling Inari, I can count on you here, right? Yup. Inari finally let go of the hug, and held up his thumb in a good guy sign. Naruto smiled and disappeared into a cloud of smoke, using teleportation instead of traveling on foot. 3. At the bridge, around the same time as Naruto starting to take his walk, so the timing was the same. Kakashi and company had just arrived at the bridge building site only to find all the rest of the bridge builders lying dead or unconscious on the ground. Immediately, the ninja group members formed a slight circle around Tazuna, protecting him from the unseen enemy. Just then, a slow and slightly visible mist surrounded the group and suddenly, 10 Zabuza forms emerged from the mist. Mizu Bunchins, water clones, confirmed all three ninjas, as both Sasuke and Sakura started shivering in tension and excitement. Kakashi looked over at Sasuke, nodding in his direction as an indication for him to start first. Sasuke nodded back and immediately disappeared from view, silently slicing up each and every clone in sight using his newly acquired skills of the chakra-enhanced kunais and his newly developed speed. Within seconds, Sasuke had returned to his original position and all 10 clones splatter into water molecules. That's when Haku and the real Zabuza finally emerged from the surrounding mist. Zabuza made a slight comment to Haku, saying that he might have found a new rival in speed. Haku nodded back silently, acknowledging the fact that Zabuza had just asked him to take care of the Genins. Haku stepped forward in a challenging stance, aiming his steady gaze at Sasuke. "I'll take care of him," Sasuke said, not moving his gaze from the boy, but he could see the others agreeing from the corner of his eyes. He too stepped forward to accept the challenge. Suddenly, both Haku and Sasuke advanced into fighting positions. Haku spun into action, reaching Sasuke's side in less than a second, and tried to stab him with a metal needle. Sasuke reacted by blocking it with his own chakra-enhanced kunai, clashing metal against metal. But Haku's needles started to bend under the stress of the powerful kunai, and he decided to change tactic by performing a one-handed seal. He can do seals with one hand? This thought went through all three Konoha ninjas' minds, but it was short-lived, because just then, Haku stomped his foot on the ground and the jutsu immediately reacted. Hai Jutsu Sensatsu Suisho no Jutsu. Special Jutsu. Flying Water Needles. Haku yelled as the metal needle held in his hand finally gave way to the more powerful kunai. But it did not matter anyway, for Haku had immediately jumped to the side to avoid the multitude of water needles that had since surged from the surrounding wet grounds and poised to strike at Sasuke. To Haku's surprise, Sasuke was able to dodge the needles by jumping straight up, avoiding all of their deadly strikes. From the air, Sasuke shot several chakra-enhanced shurikens at Haku. Haku managed to dodge all of these power-enhanced shurikens as he backflipped away from danger. The shurikens barely missed harming Haku's body and landed on the surface of the bridge, leaving behind crater-like holes a meter wide each. Haku backflipped one final time onto the ledge of the bridge and launched himself to the side, trying to avoid the last shuriken. To his surprise, the shuriken changed direction in mid-air and continued flying towards him. Haku shifted to his side slightly again, just barely missing the shuriken, but it still managed to cut across Haku's right shoulder, resulting in some small amounts of blood being released from the wound. When the shuriken turned around again to aim at Haku, Haku managed to grab onto it with his right hand and started dissolving Sasuke's chakra with his own, returning the shuriken to normal. Things made out of chakra can be destroyed by simply pouring chakra into them. 4. However, Haku had become so focused on the shuriken that he didn't realize, until too late, that Sasuke had suddenly appeared behind him and was trying to stab him with another kunai. Haku barely blocked the second attack with his left arm. Nevertheless, as he saw Sasuke preparing to flick the chakra-enhanced kunai right into his face, he ducked in time to miss the kunai flying past, just barely missing his head. By then, Haku barely noticed Sasuke twisting his body in such a way that he managed to ram Haku's face with his swinging foot. Thrown from the impact, Haku immediately tried to gather himself together, doing a somersault in midair and landing awkwardly on the wet ground, dragging himself a bit due to the slipperiness of the water. As Haku looked up, Sasuke had already prepared a new seal. Gokakyu no Jutsu, powerful fireball technique, yelled Sasuke as he blew a huge burst of fire from his mouth towards Haku. Haku reacted instantly, performing a seal of his own. Sujin Heki no Jutsu, water barrier no Jutsu. He yelled, creating a huge wall of water to dispose of Sasuke's fire. Once the fire was dissolved, revealing Sasuke's annoyed face on the other side, Haku launched himself into another set of seals. While doing so, he commented to Sasuke, "It seems I have underestimated you, it won't happen again." He called upon the water summoned by his previous jutsu to surround Sasuke completely and then finished performing his most deadly seal. Hijutsu. Makyu Hyosho, special jutsu, demonic ice mirrors. Sasuke was soon stunned into immobility as shards of mirrors started forming from all sides surrounding him. Sasuke pulled himself out of his shock and started launching Gokakyu no Jutsu, powerful fireball techniques, one after another, trying desperately to melt the ice mirrors before they completed their formation, but to no avail. Again, to Sasuke's surprise, Haku seemed to approach the mirror and merge into it, becoming part of its reflection. Sasuke started shooting several chakra-enhanced kunais towards that particular mirror, hoping to kill Haku while he was in it. However, to Sasuke's continual annoyance and horror, all the kunais struck through the mirror, but then the mirror itself quickly started regenerating until it revived itself into its original form. "You won't be able to escape my demonic ice mirrors," Haku said icily as his reflection began appearing on all the mirror's surfaces and he started to bombard Sasuke with his metal needles for all corners. Sasuke screamed, trying desperately to avoid the deadly needles. "Aarrggg. Sakura, guard Tazuna and stay behind me. If you can, get the rest of the workers out of here," Kakashi ordered as he watched Sasuke's fight anxiously, though purposely not showing any of his nervousness in front of his enemy. Hearing the scream, he rushed off towards his pupil but was suddenly blocked by Zabuza when he somersaulted over the demonic mirrors and landed directly in front of him. "Your opponent is me, Kakashi?" Zabuza sneered cruelly. "Damn," thought Kakashi. "If you get by me, I'll kill those two behind you." Thoroughly worried about Sasuke, now trapped in the ice mirrors, Sakura decided to take a small chance, and began running towards the others while throwing another chakra-enhanced kunai at the mirrors. Hoping that the mirror was weaker on the outside so she could get through to help Sasuke. Sakura was surprised and then disappointed when Haku unrepentantly emerged from the mirror catching her kunai easily. Zabuza saw his opportunity to kill Tazuna right there and then, so he threw several shurikens towards Sakura aiming to kill her. At the same time, he immediately followed that action by swinging his massive sword in an arc, trying to decapitate Kakashi, while he was distracted by Sakura's actions, in front of him. Kakashi blocked the swing with a kunai of his own and both of them could hear Sakura blocking all the shurikens that Zabuza had sent her way with her own kunai in hand. "Thank God I asked Naruto to train them," Kakashi while he concentrated on trying to kick Zabuza away so that he may be able to reach Sasuke. However, Zabuza, recognizing what he was trying to do, decided on jumping backwards, dragging his massive sword with him as he made the mist thicken by doing several more quick hand seals. With the decreased visibility, Kakashi cursed himself mentally because he had forgotten that Zabuza was a silent killer and he had the advantage currently. A sound of movement was suddenly heard from behind and Kakashi immediately turned around just in time to see Sakura blocking Zabuza's big sword from slicing Tazuna-san straight down the middle. Sakura's speed and senses had developed started rushing towards them and managed to kick Zabuza's sword away from a struggling Sakura from his side. Sliding in front to block Zabuza from his prey, Kakashi quickly lifted his head protector to reveal the Sharingan. Finally, with the Sharingan on, Kakashi would probably be able to combat against Zabuza more effectively. Behind him, Sakura quickly performed a new set of seals, grabbing onto Tazuna-san and disappearing into the mist. She had just used the invisibility genjutsu that Naruto had taught her and had also completely erased any sight, sound, scent or any other sense of them, even if they are hidden in the mist. While Kakashi was busy with Zabuza, Sasuke was finding it very difficult to figure out a way to defeat his opponent. Now, with his limited Sharingan that had showed up during his fight inside the Makyu Hyosho, demonic ice mirrors, Sasuke was able to dodge most of Haku's deadly needles but was still at a loss in finding a way out of this death trap. With all the continuous fighting, Sasuke was rapidly running out of chakra and soon would be unable to do any more jutsus. Finally, deciding on trying out one last time at breaking Haku's mirrors, Sasuke decided to use up the rest of his chakra in this final attack. Sasuke acted upon his plan during the fight when Haku started leaving the safety of his ice mirrors to rush towards Sasuke, intending to stab him with his needles in close combat. Sasuke hit back using his kunai. He managed to punch Haku's face and force him to fly back due to the impact, smashing against a mirror then falling forward onto the ground. Gaining some time, Sasuke immediately threw another chakra-enhanced kunai towards Haku, whom recovered just in time to use his hands to push and jump backwards, merging back into the mirror, barely avoiding the kunai hitting him. Said kunais smashed through the mirror, but before Sasuke had a chance to escape, Haku reformed his mirror, blocking Sasuke's escape. To Haku's surprise, the kunai had a string attached to it still held by Sasuke. Sasuke quickly held the string within his mouth, performing a few hand seals, and called forth a new technique. Kaden. Ryuka no Kutsu. Fire type. Dragon Fire no Jutsu. 4. Fire appeared from Sasuke's lips and traveled down the string, quickly setting alight the mirror that was blocking its path following the kunai. Haku quickly thrust his hand out, grabbing onto the string before the fire reached his mirror and froze it. The ice that flowed from Haku's chakra consumed the fire completely. Once done, Haku easily cut the string away to complete the reformation his mirror, while Sasuke knelt on the floor in exhaustion. Keeping the Sharingan going was really draining his chakra, and with that last assault, Sasuke wasn't sure if he could continue fighting anymore. Haku then performed a familiar seal as he had used it before. Haijutsu Sensatsu Suisho no Jutsu. Special Jutsu, Flying Water Needles. The leftover water on the ground lifted up and started flying towards Sasuke from every angle, striking his already battered body into submission. Sasuke tried to escape, but with the mirrors blocking his upward passage, he could only avoid so much using his Sharingan. As a result, he ended up being stabbed very deeply on some parts of his back. Bleeding profusely, Sasuke finally collapsed onto the cold floor in exhaustion again. This time he had completely used up all his chakra and was unable to battle anymore. Closing his eyes in anger, frustration and disappointment, Sasuke waited for Haku to kill him off. Damn it, why am I still so weak? Bellowed Sasuke mentally. Am I still not strong enough? How far am I supposed to go to finally reach up to you, brother? How hard am I supposed to work? And now, I'm about to die. I don't want to die. Desperately hoping for a miracle, the fates seemed to have answered him this time. Haku was just about to finish off Sasuke within the confines of his mirror, when a sudden wave blast of water overflowing with lightning and electricity smashed against one side of his row of demonic ice mirrors. The water forced its way through the barrier, breaking one of the mirrors and flooding the area within, surrounding protectively around the fallen form of Sasuke, while electrocuting Haku with a high voltage of electricity as it went by. Raiden Mizu Bakuhatsu, Lightning Water Blast, Explosion. 5. The calm voice of Naruto filtered in as he smashed his way through the mirror's foundations. For the time being, Haku was unable to move due to the paralysis caused by the electricity still coursing through his veins, so he could only watch on as the electrified water slowly dissipated, letting Naruto across the still wet ground. He walked slowly towards Sasuke and knelt down next to him, starting a quiet conversation with the fallen boy. Always late, aren't you? Still as unmotivated as ever, Dobi. Sasuke grunted through his pain. At least I have my pride. Naruto smiled slightly at Sasuke's ever-arrogant attitude, even when facing death. Don't talk and don't move. You'll be fine, Sasuke. Naruto checked over Sasuke's injuries but found that the needles did not attack any vital points, so with time, Sasuke would recover completely. Sasuke gasped in slight pain as he is being lightly probed with a gentle finger and showed some of his fear. I don't want to die. I still have my dream, to kill Itachi. Hush now, rest, you'll be fine, just tired, let me handle the battle for now. Naruto looked at Sasuke determinedly. Hey, and let you hog all the glory, no thanks. Sasuke snorted. Naruto smiled gently again. I don't think you're in any position to complain. I'll give you permission to kick my butt later, but for now, let me handle things. Hey, a baka all the way, said Sasuke as he drifted into unconsciousness, and Naruto quickly tried to heal some of the more severe wounds by pushing his own chakra into Sasuke to strengthen his body. I know he would never allow me to heal him if he was conscious, so it's better if he stays unconscious. Once satisfied with Sasuke's eventual recovery, Naruto stood up once again to face Haku. Already, the ice mirrors have all reformed and Haku had recovered from his paralysis. That was impressive, but I will not let it happen again. With that said, Haku launched many needles towards Naruto. Naruto dodged most of them, but some still managed to injure him slightly. Coming to a standstill, Naruto took the opportunity to have a talk with Haku. Why are you fighting us? Why are you trying to destroy Sasuke's dream, Tazuna-san's dream, by killing them? Naruto asked, hoping that it would bring some remorse into the other boy. Because I too have a dream. I want to protect someone precious to me. To work and fight for that person. To make that person's dream come true. My dream is to fulfill Zabuza-san's ambition. To help him take over the water country and become the Mizukage himself. Haku answered determinedly. Why Zabuza? Naruto questioned, still not quite understanding. I know you. You are that boy I met yesterday morning. Why did you not kill me then when you had the chance, instead of choosing to fight us now? Because. Haku paused. To become a true shinobi is difficult for me. If possible, I don't want to kill you and I don't want you to kill me. However, if you come at me to stop Zabuza-san, I can destroy my kind heart with a blade and become a true shinobi. This bridge is the place where we fight for our dreams. For my dream, I can become a shinobi and kill you. Do you understand? Haku confirmed. Yes, I understand. Naruto nodded in recognition that there was nothing he can say that will sway the boy's opinion. And for my dream, I can't die here. No matter what the cost, I refuse to die. Naruto also acknowledged this fact, but continued with the rest of his explanation. However, I won't kill you. Then you are naive and not a true shinobi. Shinobis are tools of war that are without emotions and feelings. We are simply weapons. Haku shifted into a battle stance as he ended his part of the conversation. I know, but I refuse to acknowledge that path. Naruto made his final point. Quietly, Naruto mumbled to himself though still talking to Haku. He ended the rest of his point almost subconsciously. I'm a lot like you. I used to be like that. But I don't want to be anymore. I'll follow my own path, the path I chose. With the conversation finished, Naruto immediately performed a complicated seal. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Tenkin no Buki. Come forth, Jinshi no Himo. Summoning technique. Weapons of the 10 heavenly warriors. Silver strings of death. 6. A puff of smoke appeared and slid away revealing a metal object on Naruto's right wrist. It looked like a thick metal wristband shaped like a common reel of thread, only bigger with the hole able to fit a person's wrist through. These particular threads in this device were made up of millions of tiny silver strings. Haku, confused by the odd-looking object, chose to ignore it and sent hundreds of needles towards Naruto. Naruto calmly raised his right hand, with the object attached, towards Haku and said in a soft tone. Absolute defense. Immediately the strings originally wrapped around Naruto's wrist object started moving of their own accord. Many strings began twisting and swirling around Naruto, creating a barrier protecting Naruto and Sasuke from the oncoming needles, battling and deflecting them easily. Having dealt with the needles, Naruto silently sent all the silver strings to launch at all the ice mirrors, smashing its way through the thin ice and shattering them in the process by absorbing the chakra used to create them. At the same time, Naruto also sent 3 strings towards Haku, smashing its way through the mirror currently inhabited by him to wrap around Haku's left and right wrist tightly as well as his abdomen. Haku was rendered immobile as the strings pushed him directly through the demonic mirror and started sucking up his chakra as well. With Haku in possession, the rest of the demonic mirrors slowly started to crumble away and the rest of the strings returned to Naruto, leaving only the 3 attached to Haku. Looking around, Naruto sensed someone close by, whom had used his own original jutsu to hide themselves. It could only be Sakura. He then ordered her to take care of Sasuke while he dealt with Haku, which she promptly did. Currently, Kakashi was busy parrying all of Zabuza's shurikens, kunais, and his big sword. Slightly slowing down during part of the fight, Kakashi purposely let Zabuza land a hit on his right shoulder, resulting in a large wound as well as leaving a trail of blood on the big weapon. That was the moment when Zabuza became distracted by Haku's scream of pain as he was pinned by Naruto's strings. With the time that Naruto had granted him, Kakashi quickly pulled a scroll out of his vest, flipping it through the air, rolling it open and dabbing part of his blood on it, closing the scroll again and performed a complicated seal. Once finished, he slammed his hand, with the scroll in between, onto the ground and shouted, "Ninpo summon. Doten. Suiga no Jutsu. Earth type. Earth tracking Fang no Jutsu." Once the words were called, Kakashi's summoned dogs immediately buried themselves underground, traveling towards Zabuza's currently location using their sensitive sense of smell. Once located, the dogs smashed their way out of the ground, surprising Zabuza and biting him into immobilization. While the dogs kept Zabuza trapped, his summoned mist automatically started clearing, showing Sakura next to an unconscious but breathing Sasuke, and Haku still trapped in Naruto's strings. Unseen by both, Naruto was actually starting to shake slightly due to the stress of handling the special weapon. He only hoped that he could let go of Haku soon, because if he kept on holding the weapon for too long, not only will Haku's life be in danger, so will his. However, unbeknownst to Kakashi, Naruto's predicament was not noticed and neither will it end soon. Kakashi took some precious time to catch his breath back. Gathering his strength, Kakashi performed several seals to create his only original jutsu, the Chidori, Thousand Bird, Lightning Edge. Once complete, the sounds of the thousand bird calls can be heard throughout the bridge and into the surrounding areas. Kakashi started running towards Zabuza in high speed with determination in his eyes. However, his attack was interrupted again when layers upon layers of ice mirrors emerged and stood in his way defiantly. Naruto did his best to hold Haku away from the fight between Kakashi and Zabuza with his silver strings, but it still couldn't stop Haku from desperately trying to save Zabuza. Using the last of his strength and chakra, Haku directed his right hand to perform seals, summoning as many mirrors as possible to stand in the way between Zabuza and the rapidly approaching Kakashi. With his left hand, Haku managed to throw several needles at Kakashi's scroll on the ground to unsummon his summons. The action happened so fast that no one was sure as to the outcome of the fight. Finally, when the smoke from the resulting blast of the Chidori completely cleared, the scene showed Kakashi managing to strike all the way through Haku's mirror barriers and had his palm against Zabuza's shoulder. Zabuza seemed to be hurt but not as much as to lead to his death. The mirrors took on the blunt of the attack, water and ice managing to absorb most of the electricity of Kakashi's Chidori before it reached Zabuza. Kakashi was surprised by this event but just managed to avoid Zabuza's big sword as it was swung to decapitate him. Landing some distance away, Kakashi took some time to survey his opponent's injuries. Left arm still working holding the sword, but the right arm is useless because the Chidori has completely pulled through all his shoulder that he had a good chance to win. Kakashi continued on with the fight. However, even with one arm, Zabuza was still a formidable opponent. Though, due to Zabuza's own exhaustion, Kakashi was able to slam two more kunais into the elbow of Zabuza's left arm, leaving both arms broken and immobile. Kakashi was just preparing to launch again when the infamous Gato appeared out of nowhere with many henchmen behind him sneering and laughing at the current combatants. Gato sneered coldly at Zabuza and Haku as well as the rest of the Konoha ninja team members. Naruto ignored his obvious insults to concentrate on how many men he had brought with him. Around 50 or so, I can handle them with Jinshi no thought as Gato finished off his irritating speech and called his men to attack. However, Gato surprised all of them when he told his men to leave the snowboy, indicating Haku with his fair complexion. He wanted to take some pleasure in getting his revenge on that boy. Gato smirked cruelly as Zabuza snarled back in anger. Naruto continued to sway rather dangerously at the moment but still concentrated enough to hear Zabuza and Kakashi acknowledging the fact that they were no longer enemies. Relieved by that announcement, Naruto slowly but surely lowers an exhausted Haku onto the floor. But no sooner had he done that, Zabuza asked Kakashi for a spare kunai. Kakashi readily threw one towards him. That Zabuza suddenly launched towards Gato, intending on killing him using the kunai held in his mouth. While Zabuza ran off aiming to kill Gato, Haku could only watch helplessly as Zabuza was stabbed time and time again on his way. After cutting off Gato's head, Zabuza finally fell onto the ground in exhaustion. Haku then became even more frantic as all those henchmen started to advance on an unconscious Zabuza, but he was stopped by Naruto. Kakashi had told Naruto to take point because he himself had ran out of chakra with the use of his Chidori, but Naruto still didn't want to kill anyone. "I'll just threaten them," and Naruto as he aimed his strings towards them and randomly grabbed onto several of the henchmen, lifting them off the ground and into the air, while sucking their energy. "If you move one more step, I will kill those already in the air and will also have the pleasure of killing the rest of you," shouted Naruto in his pissed-off mood of voice. The rest of the group became slightly nervous by the threat. Soon, however, Naruto was starting to sway dangerously again while he was still standing. Kakashi had also just noticed Naruto's odd behavior when he was distracted by Sakura's scream of joy. Behind them, Sasuke had finally regained consciousness and was just in time to watch the rest of the fight. While the henchmen were confused over what they should do next, Inari came to the rescue with the other villagers, scaring them off once and for all. Once all the chaos was done and over with, Naruto watched as Haku, forcing himself onto his feet, ran towards an injured Zabuza immediately. Naruto, firmly exhausted, knelt down on the cold ground. He noticed that his hearing was starting to dim slightly as if he was far away from his current surrounding. His visions too, started to blur, turning into black and white representations. Shit, I've had it on too long. Trying to focus, Naruto stabbed his own right hand with a kunai to keep it immobile. Ignoring the distant shouts of his name, Naruto used the pain that flared up his right hand to help him concentrate more. He held his left with the palm open to the side of the silver device on his right wrist, and released Kai, his summoned weapon. In a blink of a second, Naruto found himself screaming in agony as a white-hot flame burned through the inner tissues of his right arm. From the wrist to the shoulder, everything was hot and in immense pain. Muscles and blood burst out of his opening points and his veins are all singing with liquid fire. Understandably, Naruto fell into unconscious pretty quickly after such a shock. He dimly noticed that there were many cries for his name just before he passed out. He vaguely remembered that there seemed to be a lot of people worried about him. Naruto slowly but surely opened his eyes, but he had to blink them shut again at the glare of the sun. Sensing that someone was near him, he whispered a question, since his throat hurts also. "How long?" "4 days," answered Kakashi's voice. "The fever broke early this morning." Painfully, Naruto nodded his acknowledgement and promptly fell into unconsciousness again. The next day, Naruto recovered further from his ordeal and asked Kakashi for a status report on his health. Kakashi summarized. For 4 days straight, Naruto had been unconscious and on the verge of death due to his sudden high fever. His entire right arm was still completely immobile and useless until it healed, which in itself was already a miracle. And he will be feeling a lot of pain if he moves it even a little bit. Kakashi and Sasuke had both healed a lot due to Haku's herbal remedies and Zabuza had died on the second day due to the severity of his injuries. Before he died though, Zabuza had also set Haku free and wanted Haku to continue living and live happily. Due to Haku's involvement with the coup d'etat, he would be killed if he ever returned to the Hidden Mist village. Kakashi had asked him if he wanted to return to Konoha with the rest of the group and Haku had graciously accepted. He was extremely glad that Kakashi and the other two had accepted him even though he had done terrible things to them in the past. When Kakashi had finished his report, the other occupants of the house took that moment to surge on an unexpected and still injured Naruto. "Naruto, you're finally awake," shouted Sakura happily as she entered the room followed by the rest of the gang. Naruto Nisan, are you alright? You feeling better now?" screamed Inari, even louder. Naruto groaned from the attention and tried to hide under his blanket, but flinched in pain due to his arm. He had forgotten that he wasn't supposed to move it just yet. "Don't move your right arm, Naruto-kun," exclaimed a familiar and yet unfamiliar voice. Naruto looked up at the same boy he had first met in the woods, as well as the same boy he had fought a few days ago. Naruto blinked. "Hi, I don't think we were ever properly introduced before." Haku smiled and giggled slightly in response. "My name is Haku. Good to finally meet you, Haku. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I'd shake hands but as you well know, I can't move one right now." Haku giggled again while Sasuke snorted in the background, something sounding suspiciously like, "Idiot." Alright, give the guy some room to breathe." Kakashi consoled as the rest of them moved slightly away from Naruto but stayed in the same room. Looking pointedly at Naruto. "So, are you going to explain yourself or am I going to have to force you to talk?" Naruto looked back at Kakashi's determined face and sighed. There's no way for him to escape interrogation. It's called the Jinshi no Himo, Silver Strings of Death. It's one of the Tenkin no Buki, weapons of the heavenly warriors. Kakashi blinked. "But that's just legends. There's no way that it could possibly exist." Naruto interrupted. "They do exist. And they're very powerful." Sakura looked confused. "What are Tenkin no Bukis? Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi paused to gather his thoughts. Thousands of years ago, when demons still ruled this realm and humans are always living in fear of them. The first of the shinobi people whom specialize in chakra studies decided to rid the world of demons to create a peaceful world. However, because they were weaker than the demons, they started experimenting and created weapons that would be able to rival the power of such demons. The first of these super powerful weapons were called the Tenkin no Buki, or the weapons of the heavenly warriors. It is said that they are so powerful, they always inflict pain and injuries on the opponent as well as the user, so only a selected few could possibly handle any of these weapons successfully. When all 10 of these weapons are in use, no demon will ever stand a chance, and so the demons soon disappeared or went into hiding. When it is concluded by our ancestors that these weapons are too dangerous to be kept by humans, lest they be used for war against one another, the 10 Tenkins no Bukis were either hidden or destroyed. And since then, they have become only legends or myths. And you're saying that you've not only found one of these legendary weapons, you can actually use it too. Sasuke interrupted thoughtfully, wondering if he could use one of these weapons as well. No, Naruto exclaimed. They aren't to be used by people, or they shouldn't. Looking straight at an annoyed Sasuke, Naruto continued his explanation. These weapons cannot be used by just anyone. They kill their user just as they kill their opponent. You don't understand, Sasuke. They crave blood. These weapons are alive and they think. They have desire and they will use all forms of seduction to get what they want. No human can handle them without either dying or going insane and killing thousands. Then how come you can handle it? Scoffed Sasuke angrily. They chose me, Naruto whispered sadly. I am one of only a few people in the world that can handle them. It is a hereditary trait in my family, like a bloodline limit. Sakura was about to interrupt the argument when Kakashi stepped in with a question of his own. Why is it in your possession? Naruto smiled in a very self-condemning way. Because it has been my mission to find, collect and learn about all 10 Tenkin no Bukis, for the last 2 years of my life. Kakashi's eyes widened. You mean all that time that you've been traveling with Jiraiya-sama is to find these damn things? When Naruto nodded slightly in acknowledgement, Kakashi was still confused. Why? Naruto answered secretively, because it is my destiny. A few days later, with Naruto slightly healed from his ordeal and able to travel, the group finally sets out to return home to Konoha. On the day they decided to leave, the entire village had turned out to thank them. Inari, especially, started to cry and Naruto hugged him awkwardly with only one hand. Naruto then whispered into Inari's ear that his father would be proud. Inari smiled. Once they have left, Tazuna asked one of the villagers if they could call the bridge, the Great Naruto Bridge. Watching as Naruto slowly but surely made his way unsteadily across the bridge, they agreed. On their travels, Naruto sleepily mumbled that he's happy they're finally heading home. Kakashi smiled secretly, glad that Naruto was finally starting to call Konoha home.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.